Discretion advised. If you haven't yet, hit the subscribe, like, and share. Hello everyone and welcome back to another live stream with me, Grizzly. This is Grizzly True Crime, and today we're going to be deep diving a case. I'm going to give you as many details as possible about a trial that just happened in Texas, and it is such a crazy case that I hope you will follow from the beginning of this presentation because, yeah, this woman that we're looking at, Sarah Hartsfield, was just convicted of the murder of her 5th husband. So, this is the type of case that needs charts, bullet points, video clips, and everything possible. The judge did not allow cameras in the courtroom for the entire trial except for closing arguments and the verdict. We are going to watch the closing arguments together, as well as the verdict and the press conference that happened after the verdict. So, you can relax a little because we'll be here for a while. I think we'll be here for a few hours looking at everything. Grizzly said, wow, has it been 7 months since I found this channel? Oh, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your membership, for being Patreon, supporting the channel, liking, that helps, sharing, subscribing. Make sure you are subscribed. Thank you mods for everything you do. Are we ready, everyone? I'm first going to play you a video clip so you just get a quick overview, okay, of where this all started. And then I've got a presentation for you. So have a look at this.
Keith and Daniela, an ambulance rushed that woman's 5th husband here to this hospital for a suspicious illness last month. But emergency room doctors called the Chambers County Sheriff's Office when the story started to not add up. And tonight, foul play is suspected, and she is accused of murder. 46-year-old Joseph Hartsfield's online obituary reads he passed away peacefully due to complications of an ischemic stroke with his loving wife at his side. But tonight, his wife, 48-year-old Sarah Jean Hartsfield, is in the Chambers County Jail accused of murdering him. An ambulance rushed her incoherent husband to this Baytown hospital on January 7th for a suspicious illness.
For as fast as
These clips are from 2023, okay? So Sarah Hartsfield's 5th husband, Joseph Hartsfield, died in January, it was January 15th of 2023. So I'm taking you to some of the original clips of the case as the news broke, as her husband was rushed to the hospital, the things that she said on his obituary, and then, of course, her being arrested, okay?
they would think that he was getting better, he would immediately turn back right around and start crashing.
Chambers County Sheriff Brian Hawthorne says investigators dug in and performed search warrants. A grand jury returned an indictment Friday before deputies arrested her at their Beach City home. Investigators say she's lived in 39 different places throughout her adult life, and this was her 5th marriage.
When we started talking to other husbands and then finding out some of them maybe aren't alive anymore, and other issues, everything just started pointing to foul play.
They interviewed at least 3 living exes.
Every relationship that appears that she's been in, everybody wants out of it because they fear for their life.
The victim's sister tells us he was a good-hearted man, a fun-loving guy, and that all he ever wanted in life was to be genuinely loved. His accused killer has posted on Facebook several times since he died, writing in one post, "My husband, my friend, everything. I miss you every minute of every day, sweetheart. I find myself wondering if you can die from a broken heart." And tonight, the Chambers County Sheriff's Office considers this to be an open investigation. The sheriff tells us they've also...
Now, a conviction. Okay, so that's where we're at with that. Those were some of the original clips that came out as Sarah Hartsfield was arrested. So, this is the type of case, as I said earlier, that needs charts. There's 5 husbands and 1 fiancé. The person at the center of this presentation, at the center of this case, who is now being convicted to spend the rest of her life in prison for her 5th husband's murder, is Sarah Hartsfield. She's 50 years old now, I think. That's what they reported today, 50. Okay, so husband number 1, Titus, and we're going to go through each one. There's some important points I want to bring up about each one. We're going to go through a chronological timeline, a deep dive. So I hope you're ready for that, okay? But I wanted to make you this overview chart so that you have something to visualize as we're going through it. So make sure that you're looking at this and you're paying attention. Try to burn it into your brain so that when we go through the details, you know what we're talking about. But there'll be pictures for reference as well throughout. Now, husband number 1 was Titus Knurr's child, who was her high school sweetheart. I've got a flame there because she is suspected of trying to set his house on fire. She is not only a serial wife and now a convicted killer, not serial killer, but she's convicted of 1 murder. But she also is suspected of multiple arson attacks. Not that they could ever prove it, but she was there each time, you know? So now, husband number 1, Titus Knurr's child. Husband number 2, Michael Traxler. Then it was a fiancé, David Bragg. She shot him fatally, claiming self-defense. They're relooking at that case now, based on her being charged and now convicted of her 5th husband's murder. Okay, then there was husband number 3, Chris Donahue. Husband number 4, David George. And husband number 5, Joseph Hartsfield. She has just been convicted of his murder by, even though his death was undetermined, he did die from like an insulin overdose. He was a diabetic and his blood sugar had dropped severely. We're going to go over those details. But it seems like she killed him by injecting him with lots of insulin, basically. And yeah, she'll spend the rest of her life in prison for this one. Okay? So, if they're relooking at the case of the fiancé, David Bragg, that could be interesting and could bring about more charges as well. Now, husband number 3, there's a little target there on his photo because she, I'm just giving you an overview, asked husband number 4 to help her kill husband number 3's new wife. That did not pan out. Husband number 4 failed her in that regard with that request and they got divorced because of it. He couldn't do it even though he was absolutely petrified of her. Okay, so just remember this chart as we go through our presentation now. 5 husbands, 1 fiancé. There are also ex-boyfriends in the mix, but I have not put them on this presentation. There's only a few little articles that mention them. They didn't testify at the trial from what I saw, from everyone, everything that I read, the whole, witness list and all of that. So ex-boyfriends are also somewhere there. We're just looking at the husbands and 1 fiancé. Now, who the heck is Sarah Hartsfield? Sarah Jean Donahue was born in 1976 in Missouri. Her biological mother had multiple children, and her stepfather had an extensive criminal history, including a 1990 conviction for murder in a love triangle involving a shotgun killing. He served prison time for this crime. So, she had a mom and a dad, and allegedly her dad was abusive is what she claims, and then her mom left her dad, married another guy. The guy ended up being a convicted criminal. All right, and so Sarah she reportedly experienced trauma situations with her natural biological family, which makes sense in that context, right? Leading her to being placed in foster care around the age of 12 or 13. Her foster mom, pictured on the bottom right, Barb Stewart, who lived in Otterville, Missouri, noted behavioral issues emerging after the first year, like Sarah making false accusations that she had sneaky behavior and that she had a very controlling demeanor. Well, yeah, she was spot on. She was spot on with that assessment already way back then, based on everything we're going to hear about her now. Okay, so around 1990, when Sarah was about 14, her 10-year-old biological brother, who was still living with her biological mother. And it is alleged that Sarah was very jealous of that. Okay. So anyway, her 10-year-old biological brother, trigger warning, died in a bizarre accident at their mother's home in Missouri. He was playing with a nylon dog leash on the front porch when he fell, and the leash caught on the stair railing, strangling him. Their mother found him face down after he'd been hanging for at least 10 minutes. Investigators ruled it an accidental death but had noted its unusual nature. Now, I've seen that there's online speculation like, what if Sarah did it? What if she was jealous? What if she pushed him? We don't know. It's been ruled an accidental death, so it might be nothing more than that. It's just something to add to the timeline, to just kind of look a side eye, you know what I mean? So, a county caseworker observed that the mother, Sarah's mother, showed no emotion over the loss, and follow-up reports highlighted discrepancies in her story. In 2023, the Cooper County Sheriff's Office reviewed the case. Why? Why in 2023? Oh my word, when Sarah was arrested? Then they looked at the case, so that's interesting. That's why we look at this as well, it's part of the timeline. Damn, okay, so they just had a second look. Damn, she's been accused of murdering her 5th husband, now convicted. Let's have a look at that brother who died. Let's have a look at those arson attacks. Let's have a look again at that fiancé who was shot in self-defense, as she said, right? I'm very grateful when they do look back at some shady things in the timeline, just in case they can get justice for any of those people who may or may not be victims of Sarah Hartsfield. Okay, they found no evidence warranting reopening it. So that case, they just said, okay, they looked at it and there's nothing to report on there. Now, Sarah attended Green Ridge High School, Missouri. In 1993, she married her high school sweetheart, Titus child, husband number 1. She had met him in 1991, and she apparently got married to him when she was 17, and her foster mom and foster dad were there, the foster dad walking her down the aisle. So she just make, this is a quote, right? She just making it clear that I shouldn't leave her. This is from Titus. This is a quote that he said. So here the pattern starts of if Sarah feels like, oh my word, this person's going to leave me. So it's kind of like abandonment issues that turn really sinister. Okay. She said, just making it clear that I shouldn't leave her. She would leave me. So she went around telling people, oh, no, you don't leave me. I leave you. Okay. And then he said, and then as it got ugly, she told me that not to be surprised if I don't make it through this, he said. So husband number 1 is saying that Sarah Hartsfield said, just don't be surprised if you don't make it through this, the divorce. Whoa. So he said, I'm very surprised I got out of the marriage alive. Child's wife, the new wife, he got remarried to a lady called Angela. Okay. Sarah married Titus's best friend, by the way. So when he got remarried, found a new lady, married her. Sarah was like, okay, I'm going to marry your best friend. Whoa. So child's wife, Angela, said that Hartsfield remained an unwanted presence in their lives in the decades after her husband's divorce. The word for that is stalking. If you read more on what Sarah did, she was stalking husband number 1, ex-husband number 1, and his new wife. Just always showing up, just always being around their house for no reason. And there was one time, which is why I put the little flames on the previous diagram, where Titus said he could smell like gas or something. He was like, what is that? And he went outside. There were gas canisters and the walls of the house were like all wet. And he thought that somebody was going to try to set his house on fire. And he thinks it was Sarah. And we will hear more arson suspicions later with other people. So it very well could have been. All right. But we don't know that. That's not proven. It's just speculation. But still, he was like, holy crap, did she try to like burn our house down with us inside it? Now, Sarah moved to Texas, and then she married a man. This was husband number 2, Titus's best friend, Michael Traxler. He was also in the army. So she had a bit of a type initially. I think they said Titus was also in the army. I think the first 3 husbands were in the army. Okay. But she eventually decided, you know what, I'm going to go to the army. And she did. And she did very well in the army, which is also so scary when you read about her history and everything she did in the army and all of that. You're like, whoa, yeah, this is a dangerous woman given her sinister streak. You know what I mean? So in 1995, Sarah was actually arrested in Harris County, Texas, for family violence involving the assault of her then boyfriend, Michael Traxler. The case was dismissed, so I would suspect that he divorced her very quickly because of alleged domestic abuse. And so the only thing that Michael Traxler has said about the marriage is, I haven't spoken to her in 15 years. He just doesn't talk about it. He's like, Control Alt Delete. I'm done. We don't talk about that one. And he wasn't called to testify at her trial. Some of her ex-husbands were called to testify. In 1997, Sarah joined the army, which is where she met husband number 3. Christopher Donahue was stationed at Fort Wainwright in Fairbanks, Alaska. Actually, I wonder what her actual maiden name is, because I think I had it on my first slide as Donahue, but Chris Donahue is how she got that surname, right? So, Sarah Jean, her middle name is Jean. There she met husband number 3. So husband number 1, bye, marries his best friend, ta-ta now, and then now she's like, ooh, another army man. Now this guy, she was actually married to for 16 years. All the other relationships, you will see the pattern, were very short-lived. And as they said in that clip, she moved 39 times in her adult life. So she moved around a lot. She definitely didn't commit easily, but to this guy, whoa, like married for 16 years from 1999 to 2015, and they had 4 children together. She didn't have children with the others. So this one was very important to her, right? Thank you. Welcome to membership. Okay, so Chris Donahue, I would say, would be her most successful relationship. And yeah, he divorced her. She, allegedly, all the ex-husbands say, cheated on them a lot. That she was aggressive, that she was abusive, controlling, wanted to isolate them, and cheated on them. She served in the army for 20 years, retiring honorably in April 2017 as a sergeant first class with a top secret security clearance. Whoa. Her roles included motor transport operator and intelligence analyst, with assignments at Fort Hood, Texas, a deployment to Baghdad less than a year, and Fort Eustis, Virginia for 3 years. Colleagues described her as whip-smart and genius-like, capable of playing a room, but also harsh and intolerant of mistakes, leading subordinates to document interactions meticulously. She medically retired with 100% disability benefits, $3,900 monthly apparently, for conditions including pins and screws in her feet from nerve removal, PTSD, severe depression, so PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, severe depression, and she said that she had cancer 3 separate times. Maybe she did, but did she? That one I question only because I'm like, damn, sometimes she elaborates, sometimes she lies, right? So, okay, but she says, and she said it was breast cancer. All right, so that was that 20 years in the army. Can you imagine? Now, for anyone just joining now, this trial is already over. It just was not live streamed. There was no cameras in the courtroom. It's actually over today. The jury recommended that she spend the rest of her life in prison, and that's what she was sentenced to on October 9th of 2025, which is today if you're watching live with me, which is why I told you guys I was invited to discuss this case with Anna Garcia on the True Crime News podcast, which is also on YouTube. I've linked that episode in the description box if you want to go check that out. And I told you guys, it's such a complicated case. There's so many people involved. We need charts. We need like to look at all of it. And I said to you that I might actually make a summary for you once she's convicted. Oh, now she's been convicted and here we are. Okay. Now she's estranged from all 4 of her children. So remember, she had 4 children with husband number 3. All 4 of them want nothing to do with her. There's just more red flags. So husband number 1's like, oh, hell no, she's dangerous. She tried to burn my house down. She is aggressive. And then husband number 2 is like, oh my word, she's abusive. Husband number 3 is like, he hung in there for 16 years. And then he's like, you know what? No, he had 4 children with her. All 4 children are estranged from her. She's estranged from all 4 children. They allege that she was physically abusive to them, aggressive spankings, bruises leading to missed school. Her son actually said in a documentary on KPRC2, oh my goodness, KPRC2 Houston has a fantastic playlist on this case. I've linked it in the description box for you. So go check that playlist out sometime because they've been keeping up to date with everything they've seen in the courtroom throughout this trial. And they've also got a little documentary called The Two Sides of Sarah. And in it, her son said that he was actually telling one of his friends, well, I can't go to school. I'm like covered in bruises. And the friend's like, you know, that's not normal, right? Like, that's abuse. And he was like, really? I don't know. It's just like disciplining me. He's like, no. Like, you're being abused. Shame, man. So, family services was apparently called multiple times, but no action was taken. So here's a picture of her and her son. There's a screenshot from the 4 children testifying against her, 3 daughters and 1 son. And they all testified against her at a trial about the abuse and coercion that they suffered at the hands of their mother. Her son, Ryan Donahue, actually said, "It's unreal seeing my mom in the jumpsuit now," when she was arrested. And he said this in his first interview since the indictment on February 3rd of 2023. He said, "I've waited for it my whole life." Can you imagine her only son saying to the media, "Oh my goodness, I've waited for this my whole life. I'm so glad to see her in a jumpsuit, in jail, being held accountable for the person she is." And remember, she was arrested for her 5th husband's murder, which she's now convicted of. But imagine everybody else, you know, in her past being like, yes. That says a lot as well, right? Okay, so in 2014, here goes another red flag. Her grandmother dies, and her grandmother leaves her Missouri home to Sarah's older brother. So she had another brother. There's the 10-year-old brother, Shem, that died, right? Well, the brother died at 10 years old. Then she had another brother, Cody. And so her grandmother left everything to Cody and didn't want Sarah to have anything. And Cody looked after the grandmother in her last days. He was the only one to look after her fully, right? So, of course, he absolutely deserved everything that his grandmother gave her, which included acres worth of property, a house, everything she owned, right? Okay. Now, there was a funeral held, and there was Sarah. And after the funeral, and when Sarah's making her exit, wow. Amazingly and mysteriously, that night, the whole house burns down. The house that Cody inherited, he was in it. There was also a cousin in the house. The whole house bursts into flames. Multiple hot spots. It's a suspected arson attack, but they can't prove who did it. I think I know who did it, but they weren't able to prove it. And Cody's dog died. And the cousin got burns that had to be treated in the hospital. Yeah, and the timing of that, right? So, okay, Cody then immediately texted Sarah and said, "I'm still here. Whatever you tried didn't work." Wow. In 2015, Chris and husband number 3, Chris, and Sarah got divorced, and there was this huge custody battle, which I think he's also very lucky to have gotten out of that alive, right? So, in 2017, then, she got engaged to David Bragg. They met while he worked on a solar energy project at Fort Hood, Texas. They moved to Garfield, Minnesota. Reports say the relationship was volatile with constant arguments. She apparently left her children temporarily to be with him. There's other reports I've seen where she took some of the children with her and others she had abandoned, basically. All of that. Okay, so in May of 2018, Sarah fatally shot her fiancé, David Bragg, and she claimed it was in self-defense. Now, at the time, ballistics evidence actually matched her story. But there's big problems. This is why they're re-looking at the case. I just don't know what evidence they saved. What do they have? How can they prove this if it wasn't in self-defense? But yeah, the case has been reopened. Now, some of the reports will say, according to that account, she told investigators that she'd gone into the home with 2 guns. See, this is the thing. She goes into the home with 2 guns, and they could see, 2 guns were used. And wow, it looks like David Bragg shot at her, and then she shot back at him. That's her story. I worry about this one, but okay. She said there was 1 gun in her pocket, the other in the small of her back, and she went in there to grab clothes for her son after having gotten into an argument with David Bragg. Bragg came after her, crew said, after she tried to shoot him, but the gun didn't go off. Bragg took the weapon from her and fired, hitting the ceiling, according to her account. She returned fire, fatally striking him. She struck him once in the heart. Just like I would speculate exactly where she wanted to. You know what I mean? But okay. It was odd, Cruz said, that she armed herself with 2 guns and went back inside instead of just leaving. On cross-examination, Cruz said there are no pending charges against Hartsfield. Right, so, but they're looking at it. Oddly, Sarah also confessed to David Bragg's mother. So this is weird because she confessed to her fiance's mother at some point that she did torch her grandmother's house out of spite and that she was livid that Cody inherited everything. Cody's dog died, he lost the house and the world that his grandmother left him. So that's the previous slide. Cody, her older brother who inherited everything from the brother. This comes up here again because when she had almost husband number 4, at this point it was fiancé, it was a fiancé. She told the fiancé's mother, you know what I did? You know what I did? Torched my grandmother's house. Isn't that odd? And apparently, there's testimony of that of course we didn't get to see because there were no cameras in the courtroom. But you know what's interesting about this trial is that they were able to bring in a lot of these allegations from Sarah Hartsfield's past. We don't see that often. The judge allowed it in. So there were a lot of witnesses that testified to all these allegations, the arson attacks, the physical abuse, the children obviously testifying against her. 2 of her ex-husbands testified. All of these allegations, the murder for hire plot from that she asked husband number 4 to kill husband number 3's new wife, that was brought into this trial. The jury got to hear a lot. So, no wonder, here's a spoiler, they only deliberated for 1 hour. Where they went out and within 1 hour they were back. They're like, guilty. Yeah, I feel exactly how they feel when I read all of this, right? By the way, if you're only joining now, please like and share. I see less than half of you have even hit the like button. It does help to get into the algorithm to let people know we're live and so they can also learn the details of this case. We're going through a presentation and then we're going to watch the closing arguments together, which is the one thing, that and the verdict that the judge allowed cameras in. Okay, so in November of 2018, she then married husband number 4. Guess what his name is? David George. So there was David Bragg, the fiancé, and then David George, right? David George, husband number 4. It's kind of, I'm sure she didn't pick him for the name, but at the same time, it's like, okay, so your almost husband number 4 was also David, but then you decide I'm gonna now find husband number 4, and yeah, his name is David George. Okay, she married him within 6 months of the fiance's death, and then she moved him into the same house where she shot her fiance. So he was already quite petrified when he found out all about that, right? He was like, oh, because he didn't know at first. But, you know, she seems like a little bit of a bragger. Like, she'll tell people things. She's like, you know what I did? Yeah. Shot my fiance in this house in self-defense. And he's like, what? So all of her ex-husbands say that they feared for their life. And it makes sense. Okay. In April of 2021, Sarah allegedly asked husband number 4 to kill husband number 3's new wife. So you could see there, husband 1, Titus, 2, Michael. Husband number 3, Chris. Husband number 4, David. Between Chris and David was a fiance that she shot in self-defense. Okay, so she asked number 4 to kill number 3's new wife. Jealous much? And also why? She says so that, you know, he could be distracted and she could get custody of her children. Well, that backfired. We're going to find out now. Okay, so Sarah wanted husband number 4 to go and kill ex-husband 3's new wife. The FBI investigated this. No charges were filed, but the case was reopened. We see that a lot, eh? The case being reopened. Okay, so husband number 4 is pictured on the right, David George, and he's also pictured at the bottom right picture there where he was so afraid of Sarah, he did what she told him. She bought, apparently, a black car for him and a gun for him, gave it to him, said, you do not come back home until you've killed Chris's new wife. And he actually went there and pretended he delivered flowers. You could see he's got flowers. There's ring cam of that the jury got to see. He was going to deliver flowers and he just could not go through with it. He told the police, I didn't even have a gun on me. I couldn't do it. I was just there to check it out and just like go through the motions, but I wasn't going to do it. And he didn't. And he actually spilled the tea. He actually told husband number 3 and others what Sarah wanted him to do. And so that got a protective order against Sarah, and the husband then, number 3, got the custody of the children. Are you still following, guys? Okay. Kay Davidson, I think she told her to threaten her. See what I have done. Remember that. Okay. So one of her daughters, Hannah Donahue, right, testified that she was talking with the fourth husband, David George, when he began detailing the plot. So remember, the 4 kids' dad is actually husband number 3. So one of the children is talking to husband number 4. And husband number 4 starts to tell her about the plot. When he began detailing the plot, he was supposed to drive an old Honda from their home in Texas to the home of her father, which would be husband number 3, Sarah Hartsfield III's husband, Christopher Donahue, in Arizona. Okay, so he was supposed to go from Texas to Arizona to go and kill Christopher's new wife. He was to deliver flowers to their home, Hannah Donahue testified, and kill her father's new wife. Christopher Donahue testified that David George told him why his ex-wife wanted him to carry out the plot. So I'd be too distracted to see my children. Okay. That is so weird, because she wanted custody of the kids, so she wants to kill his new wife so that he's too distracted from the grief to see his children, so that then she can say that he's neglecting them so she can get custody. That's so crazy. At one point, David George, drove to Arizona and delivered the flowers to Christopher Donahue, but he didn't identify himself or say why he was there, according to an affidavit in support of a protection order that Christopher Donahue filed for in connection with the allegations. During the trial, prosecutors played a security video from Christopher Donahue's home that captured the exchange, which is amazing that the jury got to see all of this, because it's actually got nothing to do with the case, of the 5th husband being murdered. But it's interesting that all this background info came in. Now, they said Christopher Donahue testified, this husband number 3, that he learned of the plot from another daughter, and then he contacted the FBI. The special agent who investigated the allegations said he was able to corroborate them, but federal prosecutors rejected the case after David George recanted and said that Sarah Hartsfield had played no role in the plot. He was very scared of her. Asked whether David George appeared to be heavily influenced by Sarah Hartsfield, the FBI agent said he appeared to be petrified. Oh my goodness. Okay. Carol Hearn said, "Can I please have a seatbelt?" Yes, we need double buckles for this one. This roller coaster is wild. It's crazy, hey? Are you guys following? I tried to make it as simple as possible, like chronological. Let's go through this one step at a time. You might have to watch it twice. I hope you do. Okay, so in April of 2021, she then got divorced from husband number 4 because he had betrayed her, he had failed her, he hadn't killed husband number 3's new wife. How dare he? So they get divorced. She's like, "Get out of my house, you freaking failure." Okay, she didn't say that. I'm just imagining what she said. And off he went. This was 1 week after the FBI spoke to Sarah about the alleged murder plot. So she's like, "Oh my word, how dare you put me through that? FBI coming to talk to me. You didn't even do the job. Yeah, you're out of here." So Sarah lost custody of her 2 youngest kids because of the protective order granted to husband number 3, Chris Donahue. In February of 2022, she then married husband number 5. So she moves on real quick. She's definitely a serial wife, huh? Forrest Nelson said, "Thank you, Grizzly, Grizzly Cat, and wonderful Supermon squad for keeping us abreast of so many different cases. The variety and detail of what constitutes Grizzly True Crime is what keeps us here." Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks for being a member for 21 months. And I do hope you guys like all the variety of cases we deep dive, because I sure do like to prepare all these things for you, right? Okay, so in February of 2022, right, she married husband number 5. They had met online, apparently on Facebook, and they were married within 3 months. So that's the typical, I would say, coercive control behavior of Sarah Hartsfield, of love bombing, like connecting online, love bombing, and being like, "Let's move in together, let's get married." And he's like, okay. He was just excited, right? So he was a diabetic, a father of 2, and an oil worker. They then moved to Beach City, Texas in April of 2022. She likes to do that, meet someone and move them to isolate them, right? It seems to be a pattern. Okay, so husband number 4 was David George, and the next one was husband number 5, Joseph Hartsfield. And that's who she's accused of murdering. No, not accused, convicted. The trial's over, she's been convicted, she's been sentenced to life in prison plus a $10,000 fine. Now, I know in this video, this live stream, I'm doing a lot of talking. but I have to. I've got so much to share with you, so much more. And then we are going to watch the closing arguments together, as well as the verdict, as well as the post-verdict press conference. So there'll be plenty of video for us to watch after this presentation. Okay? December of 2022. Now she's married to husband number 5, remember? Okay? Sarah has breast reduction surgery. Interesting. It's just interesting with the claims of having breast cancer 3 times, and now she's having this breast reduction surgery. I don't know what's happening there. But okay, the marriage is not going well in December of 2022. If we just go back one slide, wait, we went back a bit much. February of 2022, she married husband number 5. February, okay? By December, the marriage is not going well. Oh my word. So, the marriage is not going well, and Joseph tells his mother, I'm done. She'll drive me crazy. January 6th of 2023. Joseph's glucose level was critically low for 20 hours, with over 100 alerts going to his and Sarah's phones. There's an app that alerts especially for diabetics, when blood pressure gets, too high or too low, and this alert was going off for 20 hours. And Sarah claimed, I don't know. I didn't hear anything. I was going through my own thing. He must look after himself. Okay. On January 15th of 2023, Joseph Hartsfield died after an 8-day hospitalization following a severe hypoglycemic episode at his Beach City home. His death was ruled as resulting from complications of toxic effects of insulin by the medical examiner, with the manner of death undetermined at the time of autopsy. Prior to his death, he'd made plans to leave Sarah. He opened a new, apparently secret, bank account. He was going to move to a new town as well. He wanted to get the hell away from her. He confided in his sister, Jeannie, and Uncle Floyd Johnston that he fears she'll kill him in his sleep if he leaves. That is so sad and scary, because it's pretty much what happened. You know? He could feel it. He could feel that his life was in danger. Now, Sarah Hartsfield posted on December 29th of 2022, a man who has mommy issues tends to approach relationship issues like a boy. Arrested development will turn a marriage into a daycare. Pray attention. Does she mean pray or pay? I don't know. But that's her husband she's allegedly talking about, I guess. She started to get publicly snarky at him, and everybody's taking notice, knowing about the chaos behind her, in the past. Whoa, okay. But she has got no shame. She just carries on. She was probably eyeing husband number 6 already. Now, Sarah Hartsfield updated her profile picture on January 6th of 2023. Yeah, that's when Joseph Hartsfield's symptoms had started. That is when it is alleged she actually started injecting him with insulin and giving him other drugs. Okay, so she said the longer you entertain what's not for you, the longer you postpone what is. And to that, I clap back at her and show her, yes, look at that. Look at that manifestation of you and your mugshot. That's where you belong. Ma'am, and you're going to be there forever. Life in prison. Okay, so back to the timeline. We're going now a layer deeper of husband number 5's murder. So you've heard the backstory. You've heard about her childhood. You've heard about husband number 1, 2, fiancé, husband number 3, husband number 4, arson attacks, murder for hire plots, all of that. And now we're focusing on the murder of husband number 5, because that's what she's convicted of. January 7th of 2023, around 4 a.m., Joseph Hartsfield's blood sugar drops critically low into the 40s per Dexcom data. For over 20 hours, 100 alarms alerted Sarah's phone about her husband's low blood sugar. Sarah claims she was asleep in another room on the couch, recovering from recent surgery and on narcotic painkillers, unaware of his distress. Phone evidence. Uncle Google and the phone data's gonna get you. And it did. It did. Phone evidence contradicts her claims. She had lots of activity on her phone, deleted search history as well. She had Googled Can too much insulin, sorry, I should have said much, can too much insulin cause a stroke? And then her dumbass writes his obituary after he dies, and she says the following. She writes this and edits it and posts on Facebook that she edits it to make sure it's correct. So not only does she think they're not going to find that Google search or what, she Googles, can too much insulin cause a stroke? On the obituary, she says, on October 24th of 1976, Joseph Anthony Hartsfield, 46, was born in Channelview, Texas, to Harry A. Tony Sr. and Helen M. Johnston Hartsfield. On January 15th, 2023, Joseph passed away peacefully due to complications of an ischemic stroke with his loving wife at his side. Oh, you're going to tell the world he died of a stroke? He did not. The medical examiner said, no, he didn't. But her dumbass says, can too much insulin cause a stroke? And then she writes that crap. Busted. Right? And also shows how controlling she is, because she needs to have it her way. It doesn't matter to her what the medical examiners say. No, she says he died of a stroke. Right, with his loving wife by his side. Okay, and then she goes on to name, relatives, and says on February 2nd of 2022, Joseph was united in marriage to the love of his life, Sarah, in Huntsville, Texas. Joseph's children have always been the pride of his life, and by that point, her children wanted nothing to do with her. Yeah, Stefan's like, peacefully? Due to complications. Yeah. Okay, so she told a friend, I have paid for everything to the point I have nothing left. She wrote in messages, which the friend shared with NBC News. He was just looking for a meal ticket and a way back to a lifestyle that he could never attain on his own. That was before he started having these symptoms. She's telling a friend, he's a nightmare. This guy, I paid for everything. He doesn't make enough money. And she starts looking into his life insurance policy. Really, like the usual textbook crap, that these types do. She also is such a lovely, loving woman. She posts on Facebook, don't make excuses for horrible people. You can't put a flower in an asshole and call it a vase. Yeah, right back at you. Here she is when she was arrested, speaking outside the Chambers County Courthouse. This is now during the trial. I just put this in here because it says the sheriff whose office handled the investigation into Joseph Hartsfield's death said that Sarah Hartsfield is not that kind, sleepy little person that she makes herself out to be. You can just look at her overall history and you can tell that there's a very evil side to her. Okay, the Chambers County Sheriff Brian Hawthorne told reporters. A very evil side to her. Okay, so now, from January, remember on January 7th, Joseph is not coping at home with whatever's happening to him. And January 8th to the 14th, he was transported to a Baytown, Houston area hospital. That's where he was from that time. His blood sugar crashes repeatedly, despite aggressive IV glucose treatment, as if counteracted by exogenous insulin. The doctors and nurses note unexplained symptoms, unresponsive to standard diabetic care. Like, they were confused. Like, what is going on here? Why can't we recover? Why can't we help him recover? Right? So they're saying these are not normal symptoms. Joseph's condition deteriorates and he slips into a coma. Sarah appears calm in body cam footage during a 4 a.m. home search. So they went to the home. There were lots of insulin pens. They said actually 2, but it looks like later they report there was like 10 at the time on his bedside table. But she was calm, showing them around the house and everything, because they were like, something is fishy here. Let's go check it out. Let's go check out the house and just do some background searching here and talk to Sarah and see what's going on. And they just said she was very, very calm. Then she shared a public Facebook video of herself weeping over his bed. And apparently she said that Joseph had a do not resuscitate order and that she was in control of when to turn the life support off, which she allegedly did. Wow, that is scary. So here she was, somebody was filming this. Okay, and saying that, his organs could be donated. And I still want to know, if anyone knows who filmed this, I would love to know, because who did she ask to film this whole pretend Oh no, I'm weeping over my husband's dying body. Like, that is so creepy. And then to post it on Facebook. We've seen other cases like that, right? Okay. So while Joseph was still in the hospital on January 10th, Sarah was discussing his life insurance policy. I wonder why, hey? Okay. Joseph died on January 15th of 2023. She said, I guess I'm going to try to sleep. I can't possibly cry and weep any more than I have this evening. That's what she wrote on January 27th on Facebook. She said, I love you, Joseph Hartsfield. And she tagged him all the time after that as well. Like, she needed to show that she's this weeping, grieving wife, you know? Okay, ready for the autopsy or medical findings? The results were the cause of death. She testified, so it's just snippets from trial testimony that's been summarized in articles. I put the links to my sources in the description box. A lot is from KPRC2, Click 2 Houston, the Fox News locally as well, and also NBC has also done a great job at covering this. Okay, so the cause of death, she testified, was complications of toxic effects of insulin, essentially an insulin overdose. Joseph also had, other drugs in his system, and apparently, according to his family, he didn't just take medication. He wasn't the type to just like take headache pills or other medication. He'd rather not. So the fact that he had Benadryl, Valium, Rapinerol, I actually thought they were mispronouncing like Rahepanol, which is like the date RAPE drug, but actually it's Rapinerol, which is for restless leg syndrome. And what was the other one? Wait. Rapinerol was also for, it's used alone or with other medicines to treat Parkinson's disease. This was all apparently her medication. All right. And this could all induce drowsiness because the nurses and doctors were like, whoa, so if the alert was going off for 20 hours, why was he unconscious basically? Why was he incapacitated, not able to respond, not able to call for help? And why did she not hear it? Oh, she says she was sleeping in another room. Right, didn't hear it. Cool. All these other drugs are in his system as well? Okay, he did not have an ischemic stroke, as Sarah claimed on his obituary. The medical examiner saw no evidence of a stroke, despite Sarah Hartsfield contacting her office. Okay, control freak. She's like, oh, hello. She contacted her office and she sent surveillance video that she believed showed signs of one. Sarah, was trying to convince the medical examiner that no, he did have a stroke. He did. Look, I've got surveillance footage for you. Like, what do you mean? What kind of footage did she have? Like cameras in the house or what? That is so creepy though. She's like, see, I'm trying to convince you now, medical examiner. He had a stroke. Red flag. His symptoms suggested deliberate counteraction to hospital efforts. Hospital staff flagged foul play due to Joseph's unexplained crashes after treatment. 2 doctors who treated or monitored Joseph then took the stand. Dr. Inakwa, an endocrinologist, testified that Joseph had uncontrolled type 1 diabetes and said that Joseph wasn't compliant with prescribed insulin doses. Joseph had anxiety about hypoglycemia, and Joseph would always do less or skip it. He'd always run a little high, they said, so everyone was surprised when they said his blood sugar was so low. Okay, but the defense used that in their defense, saying, well, he didn't manage his insulin properly. He didn't manage his diabetes properly. He didn't take his medication like he should and all of that, so they victim blamed a lot, right? And also because it was undetermined, right, exactly how he died, but they did say it was from complications of toxic effects of insulin. Thank you, Alicia. So, yeah, the defense was very, very busy with that in their defense to say, see, it was his fault. She didn't do anything because no one could prove that she injected him with insulin. They weren't able to prove that. There's just a lot of circumstantial evidence, which is why I'm also happy they were able to bring in the past red flags, the past events for the jury to help the jury decide as well. It's not what we usually see, but I'm glad they were able to because she sounds like a very dangerous person. Okay. So Under the Mystic Moon said, I used to take that for restless leg syndrome. Yeah, and then you said it makes you sleepy. That's what I read it, that Rapinerol that he had in his system is used alone with other medications to treat Parkinson's disease and or restless leg syndrome. So I wonder if she even had that. Like, did she have restless leg syndrome or what? The neurologist told jurors that it was very difficult to get low blood sugar and that the most likely cause would be too much medication orally or insulin. He testified that medications like Valium, Ropinirole, and Benadryl could make a patient extremely drowsy, and combined with prolonged hypoglycemia would likely not be able to get up, walk around, or act normally. He ruled out stroke, saying that Joseph's case was an acute event based on lack of blood sugar, and testified that Joseph was more at risk of severe brain damage if someone introduced something to his body that made him have severe low blood sugar. Sarah told the deputy that Joseph got up multiple times before she called for help to get a drink and use the bathroom. She said that she made him a broccoli, cheese, cheddar, rice casserole dish around 4:30 or 5, but that Joseph only ate a bowl of it. She added that Joseph asked for 2 insulin needles. Oh, she's victim blaming now. Like, he asked for 2 of those, yeah. I don't believe any of that. Clearly the jury didn't either. Yeatman testified that Sarah told him she was watching Dexcom and Joseph was snoring loudly and that alerts were going off and that she was seeing them. Okay, that's a different story. See, sometimes she said she didn't hear them at all. Sometimes she says, yes, I saw them. She also said that she was out of it because of prescribed medication from recent surgery and that she was staying on the couch in the living room in and out of sleep. Sarah admitted that she felt guilty because she was falling asleep. I think you should feel guilty because you killed him, not because you were falling asleep. Now, let's get into the cell phone evidence. I'm sure you guys like this as well, right? Cell phone evidence. This is where Uncle Google's going to get it. I just really want to see, there's another clip that I had for you, which was what? Oh, yeah. Okay. Maybe let me show you that as a break. Look at this clip here quickly. Where after Sarah was arrested in February of 2023, she literally broke her silence and started contacting Bryce Newberry, brilliant reporter. He did such a good job reporting on this case since her arrest. She started contacting him. She sent thousands of messages to the media. So just have a listen to this quickly.
Daniela, Sarah Hartsfield tells me she has filed paperwork to fire her court-appointed attorney, and in her first statement since her arrest more than 2 months ago says prosecutors would almost be crazy to proceed with her case. Using this kiosk inside her all-women Chambers County jail cell, Sarah Hartsfield is writing her first public words since her February arrest. I'm looking forward to going home, even though going home means that I have to really begin my life without Joe, who would have been appalled at his family's behavior at the hospital, but absolutely horrified at the hate campaign they enlisted against his wife to do what they have, all because they couldn't handle Joe choosing his wife and marriage over them. A grand jury indicted Sarah for murder after her husband of 11 months, Joseph Hartsfield, died at this Baytown hospital. The medical examiner's office ruled the cause complications of toxic effects of insulin. The manner, which could include homicide, suicide, or natural causes, was left undetermined. With the ME's findings, the burden of proof for the DA just shifted significantly. They'd almost be crazy to proceed. I wrote my own motion for a bond hearing and mailed it with the letter firing Mr. Kirkwood, Sarah wrote. Keaton Kirkwood is her court-appointed attorney, who has not responded to multiple requests for comment from KPRC2.
You can't fire that court-appointed lawyer because you think he or she is laying down on the job.
That's unless the defendant can hire their own attorney or one takes on the case pro bono. If not, it's not up to them.
The only entity that has the final say-so about removing court-appointed counsel is the judge.
Court documents reveal Joseph's sugar level tanked dangerously low into the 40s, that Sarah ignored a phone app sending alerts and waited an hour to call 911 after finding the diabetic unresponsive. His family told investigators at the hospital the couple had a toxic relationship, his mother speaking only on 2 earlier this month.
He was leaving her. He had already discussed moving with someone. He just said, Mom, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. If I stay, she's going to drive me crazy.
They were repeatedly divisive, intrusive, and didn't want to be a part of our life. They wanted to drag Joe back to a life he voluntarily left. While their pain is relevant, I lost my husband that I loved dearly. They ensured I suffered alone every step of the way, no matter how many olive branches were extended to them. She remains in jail on a $4.5 million bond, which our legal analyst calls excessive.
There's no limit to the number of times you can go before a judge and ask that your bond be reduced.
Sarah calls the lies and accusations hearsay, writing, It's about time I quit being vilified by his family and by the public. I never deserved how I was treated. And Joe, our relationship, our marriage, our story ended way too soon and not by any wrongdoing.
Man, 11 months from meeting him to when he died. Like, what the hell? Okay, ready to dive into the cell phone evidence? So, she claims she was asleep on the couch. She didn't see any of those alerts about his blood sugar being so low. Although she later claims, that she put a glass of juice next to his bed and also some jam, and she was trying to give him that to like resuscitate him. So there's a lot of mixed stories there already. So her stories alone are interesting. But the cell phone evidence, I think that for the jury must have surely been the most damning, because she says, I didn't hear my phone. I didn't do anything. I was sleeping the whole time. This reminds me of Corey Richards, when Corey also says, I was sleeping. No, you weren't. Your phone says everything. You did so many steps. You went here, you did that, then you put the flashlight on, then you did this, all of that. Same with her. So, constant phone activity contradicting her alibi. Sarah claimed that she was asleep and on narcotic pain medication due to recent surgery during the 20 hours that Joseph Hartsfield suffered critically low blood sugar on January 7th of 2023. However, phone records showed near constant activity starting at 4 a.m., including calls, text messages, Facebook messages, grocery orders via the HEB app, which HEB, Texans have taught me, that's like a local Trader Joe's, right? It's like a local Costco, like a local place to shop, okay, for groceries. And then they've got everything. HEB app and internet browsing, contradicting her claim of waking at 1 p.m. Oh my word, her cell phone revealed all. Apple movement data. Apple's activity tracker recorded steps taken by Hartsfield every hour of the day. Oh dear. Except between 1 and 2 p.m. when she claimed to be awake and helping Joseph. My goodness. So she says, I was asleep, and then between 1 and 2, I was trying to help him. The cell phone proved exactly the opposite. You were busy on your phone. There was movement going on. You were doing all sorts of things, except in that 1 hour when you claimed to be helping him when he really needed the help. Well, he needed it for 20 hours. Okay, so this lack of movement during this hour before her 911 call at 2:02 p.m. raised questions about her priorities and actions. Yeah, okay. Then, messages from Joseph's phone at 5 a.m. During the 5 a.m. hour, messages were sent from Joseph's phone while he was incapacitated to Hartsfield's, including his driver's license, new bank account details, and an Apple legacy contact setup granting her access to his data post-death. Wow. Okay. Medical testimony indicated that Joseph was likely incoherent due to low blood sugar, suggesting Sarah sent these herself. I think so. Deleted. Oh, we love that. Deleted internet search history. Yeah. Okay. Sarah's internet search history for the day before and the day of Joseph's hospitalization, January 6th to 7th of 2023, was deleted. The earlier insulin-related searches were recovered. This deletion was flagged as potential evidence of hiding incriminating activity. Over 100 glucose monitor alarms. Joseph's Dexcom glucose monitor sent approximately 100 unsilenced, so meaning it was loud. They actually testified it was loud. Alerts to Sarah's phone over 20 hours, indicating his critically low blood sugar. Sarah claims she was unaware due to being in another room and medicated, but phone activity suggested otherwise. Facebook messages and the 911 intent. At 2 p.m., minutes before her 911 call, Sarah messaged a friend about Joseph's diabetes management and stated, I'm going to call 911, raising questions about her priorities during the crisis as she was actively communicating rather than solely aiding Joseph. And she was victim blaming then already, saying he doesn't manage his diabetes well. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be the hero today and call 911. And the friend was like, okay, do that. It's just alibi talk, right? Molly G said, just want to thank my Grizzly fam for being my exercise buddies. I'm officially 65 pounds down this year and counting. That is so amazing, Molly. Congratulations. And thank you for taking us with. All right, wherever you go, wherever you're exercising, I really appreciate that. So, then, life insurance discussions. Sarah initially denied knowledge of Joseph's license. she denied knowledge of his life insurance policies No, I had no idea he had those. Right. But phone records revealed text messages months prior where she and Joseph discussed policies, including her ensuring that he had a beneficiary set up, contradicting her statements to police. Oh, months before. You mean like months into the marriage? You were already telling him, put the life insurance, get me on your life insurance. Am I the beneficiary? Will I get anything and everything if you die? Cool, cool, cool. Let's discuss that, shall we? Sign here. That is very premeditated. Okay, so deleted messages recovered. Detective Skylar Ross recovered deleted messages from Sarah's phone, including iMessages, showing attempts to conceal communications. These included discussions and actions inconsistent with her narrative of being completely incapacitated, just sleeping. Grocery order evidence. She ordered groceries via the HEB app during the early morning. Like, imagine that. Your husband is suffering. He's dying. He's vomiting, apparently. He's incapacitated, he's sweating, he's literally suffering, and you are ordering groceries? That's where your mind is at? Oh my goodness. So they said when police entered her home at 4 a.m. on January 8th, the groceries were still on the kitchen table, not put away, supporting the timeline of her activity, while her husband was in distress. So she actually went ahead and completed that order as well. Can you imagine if she's sitting there like ordering ice cream, chicken. Okay, I'm also going to order some of, I don't know what she's ordering. She's ordering food while her fifth husband is dying. Surveillance video, and this is all when she says she was sleeping, remember? Okay, surveillance video contradiction. Oh my goodness. Sarah claimed home surveillance cameras were offline for a week due to a new camera installation. Oh, the timing of that. I don't know why the surveillance cameras were not working because I deactivated them just for 1 week because we're going to get new ones. Sure. Okay. However, she sent a surveillance video of Joseph from January 6th of 2023 to the medical examiner, claiming it showed stroke-like symptoms, contradicting her statement and suggesting selective use of the footage. Did she delete the rest or what happened there? That sounds extremely shady. February 3rd of 2023, Sarah Hartsfield was arrested. Thank goodness. And charged with intentional murder of Joseph Hartsfield. Her bond was initially set at $5 million, later reduced to $2 million. She wasn't able to get out. She's been in the Chambers County Jail in, I don't know how to say that exactly, Anaheim, Texas. In that jail since her arrest. May of 2023, there was apparently a self-deletion, as censored for YouTube, attempt in jail. And so she was put in a segregated pod where they could watch her, right? In 2023 to 2025, she sent thousands of text messages to the media, and multiple attorneys withdrew from her case, saying that there was a conflict of interest, or, you know, they just came up with their own reasons. Oh, there's a screenshot I have on the right-hand side there, where that was one of them that she sent to Bryce Newberry, which actually says, let me just see, oh yeah. I didn't ignore his Dexcom alerts. I was on my own pain regimen in another room after having another surgery. Joe knew I couldn't do anything for him. I was sleeping most of the day and night. Liar. Well, that is proven to be a complete lie. Anyway, so September 29th of 2025, which was last week, Sarah's trial started with jury selection. There was a jury selected of 8 men. How interesting is that? Damn. 5 husbands, 1 fiancé dead, husband number 5 dead. 8 men on the jury. Okay, looking at her like, holy crap, lady. 4 women and 2 alternates were selected. September 30th to October 8th was the trial. There were no cameras allowed. The judge said only for closing arguments and the verdict. They're not live streamed, pre-recorded, like filmed and uploaded. We're going to be watching those closing arguments in a moment. And so the first witness for the state was Joseph Hartsfield's mother, Helen. Now, I'm not going through every single witness. I have, however, put a link to a Fox 26, I think it's Fox 26 Houston, article, which actually does a recap. Then if you go to that one, it'll say day 1 recap, day 2 recap, day 3, all of them, all the days, which is very helpful if you just want to read through it. But I will tell you who all testified, okay, bullet points. But I just wanted to tell you that the first witness for the state was actually Joseph, the victim's mother. She said that he was worried about diabetes due to his father's struggle with it, and that she initially liked Sarah, but she felt the relationship went way too fast. She was concerned that Sarah didn't have custody of her own children, and that Sarah would lock Joseph out of the house when she was angry. They fought regularly. She said that Sarah was controlling, that she put Joseph on a budget and complained about his income. We even saw that on Facebook. It became more difficult to get a hold of Joseph. Sarah isolated him. It became more and more difficult, and within months, to get hold of her own son. Helen said that Joseph stayed with her after a fight and then returned home, he said, just because of his work. He left her a voicemail that said, "I went home preparing to be shot," but it didn't happen. Sarah told Helen that she had shot and killed a man in self-defense in the past, which made her even more worried about her son. You see that? You know when Sarah told her fiancé's mother, "You know what I did in the past? Torched my grandmother's house." It's weird. She tells on herself. She talks about the past, almost like bragging of "you know what I did." It's like a threat. I think it would feel like a threat as well. Just be careful now, I'm very dangerous. Do you know what I mean? Because she's telling husband number 5's mother that she actually shot and killed a man, but in self-defense in the past. Whoa, but that made Joseph's mother very worried. Once Joseph was hospitalized, Sarah prevented his family from seeing him. And she also kept them from attending the funeral. Apparently, she for a moment let his mother, in to the hospital room, but no one else, not the sister. I think he has a brother as well. Not the sister, not the brother, no other family members were allowed because they were just so mean to her. Yeah, she made it about her. Now, Titus, husband number 1, and Chris Donahue, husband number 3, were called to testify. Sarah did not take the stand. The defense rested without calling any witnesses. So let me just quickly tell you the witnesses included Joseph's mother and sister, a dispatch supervisor, Joseph's doctors, police officers, and then meaning doctors that were helping him treat his diabetes, right, and manage that. So police officers, the neurologist and medical examiner, Hannah, Sarah's former friend, Doris, the fiance's mother, who testified what she told him about torching the house, the grandmother's house, Cody, Sarah's brother, the one whose inheritance was satellite, an FBI agent, Titus, husband number 1, Christopher, husband number 3, Joseph's cousin and friend, and the lead investigator. That's who testified at the trial. So on October 8th, that was yesterday, everyone, if you're watching live with me, of 2025. By the way, if you're watching from the future, thank you so much. I really appreciate replay watchers as well. If you ever feel like, what should I watch or what can I do while I'm cleaning, running, walking, grocery shopping, whatever, if you put any of my old videos on, it really helps support the channel as well. Okay, so yesterday, October 8th of 2025, the jury found her guilty after 1 hour of deliberations. 1 hour. That's amazing. October 9th, that's today of 2025. They went home, they had to come back, they had to deliberate again in the sentencing phase to recommend what they thought the sentence would be or should be. And then the judge would ultimately sentence her. She was sentenced to life in prison and a $10,000 fine. Nice. I'm just so relieved. Oh my goodness. Yeah, 1 hour of deliberation says it all, says Stefan. 1 hour. I mean, that's just to walk out, do the paperwork, have a drink of water and then come back guilty. Very, very guilty. So now, are you ready to watch the closing arguments with me? Just remember this. Just remember this. Just picture it. Husband number 1, husband number 2, which was actually husband number 1's best friend. Fiancé, David Bragg, shot in self-defense. Maybe it was self-defense, but I say self-defense because I just don't believe anything she says at this point. Husband number 3, Chris Donahue. Husband number 4, David George, who she asked to kill husband number 3's new wife, which did not work out for her, thank goodness. And then husband number 5, Joseph Hartsfield. She's convicted of murdering him. There was justice served for Joseph Hartsfield, which I'm so glad about. I'm so relieved for him and his family because no one was sure, well, what evidence do they have? It sounds very circumstantial. It sounds like she has a shot at this. No, very, very guilty. All right, so what we're going to do is watch now the full closing arguments, which is an hour and 42 minutes long. Let me make sure I boost it for us as well. Okay, no, that's not it, this one. Are you ready? Here we go, everyone. Closing arguments, which took place on October 8th of 2025.
Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. The defendant's deceptions, clever little half-truths, her performance, it can get over on some people. She's really convincing if you don't look too closely, if you don't ask too many questions, or make her angry. But just like the spider and the fly, where the fly is drawn into the spider's webs, Joe Hartsfield unfortunately was drawn to the defendant, and he got caught in her webs. Defense counsel made a lot of promises to you in open that were not fulfilled. There is no evidence, other than the defendant's own words, that she was actually under the influence of narcotics. In fact, the evidence is to the opposite. There's actually no evidence that his mismanagement of diabetes led to this heart issue that killed him. The statement that Joe's family had no evidence that she did this. Your family member is desperately trying to leave a woman who you know killed her fiancé, who you know, because of her own words, that she's being investigated for a murder for hire, that you know, you have watched the violent swings in her communicating with you. And you know that your son and your brother is scared for his life. You know his worst fear. And you know he's hospitalized for that fear coming to life. And you know that the doctors who are treating him are suspicious of the same person you are, but they had no evidence. Defense counsel told you that the evidence was going to show that Joseph Hartsfield suffered a stroke. And in fact, you heard definitive testimony that that's not what happened to him. Defense counsel told you that Detective Rocks made the decision to bring her to court without any investigation, and you saw the exact opposite. You heard from Detective Rocks that she poured through the voluminous records in this case. You saw how precise she was on the stand. You knew some of the people that she spoke with in this investigation. And to call this no investigation is an incredible mischaracterization. To say that we don't know the who, the where, the when, it's just a gross mischaracterization of what you saw play out during this trial. If the defendant wanted to kill her husband, that she held a lot of contempt for, how would she do it? What is the way that provides the best defense for her? The most obvious one. And had it happened somewhere else, had it happened with a different family, she probably would have gotten away with it. But Joe's family was paying attention. The medical staff was paying attention. Detective Rocks was paying attention. Sarah miscalculated who she could do this to and where she could do it. Think back to what defense counsel has tried to draw out of witnesses when things don't matter. Think back to the second witness, Joe's sister, Jeannie Hartsfield, Think back to his mom. What was he fighting with them about? What type of diabetes Joe had when he knew the medical records were very clear? What was the point of that? That Joe should have been low whenever every documented thing says that he ran high? The defendant thought she was the smartest person in any room and that no one could catch her and that she was going to get away with it because that's what she's always done. When defense asked the doctors, when I asked the doctors how many times they have had an insulin overdose and then how many times they'd seen someone die of it, what was their answer? This is not something that people in this country, with the medical care that we have, that have lived with this condition for this long, die from. It is a statistical problem with how she killed him. It's a practical impossibility based on how he treated his own diabetes and how he died. Blood sugars are easy to fix. You heard this repeatedly. This is something that was throwing them off in the hospital because this is not how a body should react. If you accidentally administer too much insulin to yourself when there's not the intent to kill you, when there's not the waiting and watching you die of it, this is a treatable thing. But that's not what got to happen. That's not what happened for Joe. Because it wasn't an accident. It was the defendant making sure he got enough insulin in his body that he couldn't recover. Defense counsel wants you to focus on the fact that Joe had uncontrolled diabetes, when in reality, that uncontrol was Joe being high. And you heard his fear, his terror of being low. That was intentional on his part. He didn't want to risk being too low. But defense counsel wants you to focus on the uncontrolled part, because that much better fits their narrative of really Joe just did this to himself.
I'm just going to quickly pause there. So what we're watching is the closing arguments that thankfully the judge allowed cameras in for, and it's 1 hour and 42 minutes long. We are also going to watch the verdict, and we're going to also see the press conference post-verdict. Now that was yesterday. The jury went home. They had to come back, deliberate on what the sentence they would recommend, and the judge sentenced Sarah Hartsfield to life in prison without parole and a $10,000 fine. She got LWOP'd today. This is why I'm covering this, because finally we get to talk about the whole case, what came out of the trial, the backstory, everything. So I wanted to make sure that it's almost a bit like a mini trial, right? Because we weren't able to see it, so that we can go over everything and see what we could see. I wish we could see the whole trial. That would have been great, but we weren't able to. So this is what we got. So I hope you'll be here with me throughout the closing arguments, the verdict, the press conference, and then we can debrief afterwards as well. All right.
But you saw the Dexcom readings. You read the medical examiner's determination. You heard the testimony from the doctors. This was something that happened to him, not because of him. And what should you make of the people that came and testified about their experiences with the defendant? Is every person in Sarah Hartsfield's life just trying to conspire against her? Or does it show statistical impossibility? I told you from the beginning, and now we're here. You've seen it. She's a performer. Another well-timed tear, another look over her shoulder to the camera, another carrying of her prop that she forgets sometimes and doesn't seem to touch unless she knows someone's watching. It's showmanship for her. Another fly caught in her web. It is really, really rare to encounter someone of this nature. And for the good of the community, for the good of the world, you 12 have to form an opinion. You have to do something. For far too long, too many people have known and have done nothing. You know what she did. There are people who didn't have faith in her being held accountable because she's really slippery. She's really effective at making a very attractive web. And she's good at tangling people so tightly into this web. But you are ready and you have the opportunity and the duty to right this wrong. You can fix what other people have failed to do. You can stand up and you can say, enough, enough. These are the elements. These are the only elements that the state has to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt. And we went over these in voir dire. I don't have to prove, as defense counsel continually asks, I don't have to prove how she did it. I would love to know. I would love to know how she did it, but that's not one of my elements. Did she intentionally or knowingly cause the death of Joseph Hartsfield? I don't have to prove that she's not a likable person. I don't have to prove that he is a likable person. I don't have to prove why she did it. Those are my elements that the judge just read to you in your charge. And if you find that I've met these elements beyond a reasonable doubt, and you vote anything other than not guilty, you are holding me to a higher burden, and you are violating the oath that you took. You have heard all of the admissible evidence at this point. What I say, what defense counsel says, not evidence. It's obvious that there have been things that the court has ruled are improper for you to hear. The only thing that you can consider is the evidence that came from that stand and the evidence that's been admitted in trial. And that alone is enough to prove to you that this defendant committed this act with that intent. And you know where she did it? She did it right here in our home. She did it in Chambers County. For a moment, I just want to go over the jury charge with you. The most important part of the law is on the first page. A person commits the offense of murder if she intentionally or knowingly causes the death of an individual. Those are my elements. And you heard about the law regarding extraneous offenses. And you can consider that if I've met that burden as to those offenses beyond a reasonable doubt. Some of you may think, yep, that one's proven. Some of you may think, I'm not sure on that one. That's an individual choice. What must be unanimous is your verdict of guilty. That page, I would submit to you, is the most important. And that's page 8 of the jury charge. I can't tell you if she put the needle in him herself, or if she grabs his hand and uses his own hand while he's drugged by her drugs when he's unconscious, and she uses his own hand to do it. I can't tell you that, and there's a reason I can't tell you that. Because murderers hide how they murder people generally. But
Quick pause, trying to find a moment. Arlene said, I know nothing about this case, but because it's your channel, I'm here for it. Well, one, I appreciate that. Two, if you watch from the beginning, you'll know everything that we know so far, well, that we know about the case. As much as we can know in one sitting. Because there were charts, there were bullet points, chronological timelines, her background, husband number 1, 2, 3, fiancé, husband number 4, husband number 5. We went over everything. So, for anyone only joining now, please do check out, that's your homework, okay? The beginning, before we start watching closing arguments. Later, watch it tomorrow, later, whenever you can, because we did recap this entire case.
you get to use your reason and your logic and your common sense. And you also get to know that that's not one of my elements that defense counsel wants to hold me to. Defense counsel would have you believe that we're here today because a rogue detective performed a shoddy investigation and the state, the government, has railroaded an innocent woman. But we're here today because a woman, the defendant, murdered her husband in cold blood. That's why you have been summoned and you have sat through testimony and you have paid attention, and now is your call. And I think most of you probably know where you are. I've watched you pay attention. You can look at the evidence, of course, but when you go to the back, I would recommend that you pick a foreperson and you take a quick poll to see where you are. Some of you are probably already there. Some of you may want to look at certain things. You can request some of the evidence, you can request all the evidence, or after your poll, you can say, actually, we're good. I'm going to sit down for a moment, and defense counsel is going to be able to talk to you, and I want you to pay attention to what he says. And I want you, again, like I said in open, lean in and pay attention to what he's asking you to focus on.
Now just listen to how snarky this is. I was like, whoa, I kind of like it when there's a little bit of conflict in the courtroom between the state and the defense. Like, listen to what this defense attorney is about to tell you. And I'm like, oh my, okay, check this out.
He is a skilled attorney. He is really, really good at his job. So don't fall into that web. Don't fall into that trap. When he's asking you to look at the whole and not the whole picture, lean in and see what he is arguing to you. What he tries to convince you is an element when it's not. Listen to how he tries to make the pieces fit that don't belong. And remember what your job is. Thank you.
Oh my. Imagine being the defense attorney now. They've got to be so strong as well to come back from that, to be like, listen to the crap that he's about to tell you, basically. And now the defense attorney has to stand up and be like, okay, let me tell you what our defense is, all right? So, I mean, he really gave it his best shot as well. I think he did pretty well. Let me see if I wrote down his name. His name, defense is Case Darwin. And so he's up next, and then of course the state will have their rebuttal as well, which this is interesting because that was 16 minutes long. 16 minutes, then the defense goes, actually don't know, wait, for how long will the defense go? The defense will go up until 56 minutes, so about 40 minutes for the defense now, and then it'll be the state's rebuttal for another 45 minutes. So sometimes we see the state speak for longer first, then the defense will go, and then the state will do their rebuttal for like 15 minutes or whatever, right? This was the other way around. Quite clever, actually, from the state in this round. Okay, so here we go. Now we're going to watch the defense's closing arguments. Of course, we know this was yesterday. She's already been convicted. She's already been sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Yes, and that's just for her fifth husband's murder. I say just because there's so much else in her background, so many other things that, you know, cases that are being reopened, things being relooked at. I wonder if we'll ever see more charges. Either way, I'm so glad that there was justice for Joseph Hartsfield. Before they start, Adam Bluefire said, do we know if this defendant has a criminal record, bar the supposed self-defense of one of her exes? She really doesn't. She's actually got a pretty clean record with lots of red flags and 20 years of military experience. She did really well in the army. So, yeah, it's incredible for how long she wasn't caught with the patterns that she had. But this is where, yeah, she was convicted of murder now.
May it please the court. I think that this case is exactly what I told you that this case would be in the beginning. The state is telling you a story, a narrative. The state conceded to you from reading its own indictment that it can't prove its case because its own indictment tells you that Joe died in an unknown manner and means. Ms. Vargas even told you in opening, quote, something happened that made that man's blood sugar crash. She even just told you in closing, I can't tell you what happened. The medical examiner, her boss, her colleagues, all told you that Joe died in an undetermined manner. That is not a homicide. Joe suffered from severe medical problems. 1, uncontrolled type 1 diabetes. 2, severe heart issues. 3, peripheral neuropathy. 4, sleep apnea. And 5, intestinal issues. Meanwhile, Sarah was under the influence of multiple narcotics from a recent breast surgery. The law is unequivocally clear that Sarah had no duty to act. That is, a failure to act is not criminal. Although, I do concede it's not good practice. It's not good practice. Joe administered that insulin to himself. Why else is the state focusing on all these extraneous acts rather than focusing on the indictment? It's because they can't prove the case. Now, I'm going to go over some pieces of the charge with you. If you look at page 4, it says all persons are presumed to be innocent and no person may be convicted of an offense unless each element of the offense is proved beyond a reasonable doubt. Remember back in jury selection, we talked about how wrongful convictions occur. And each and every one of you told me that wrongful convictions occur. How do we prevent wrongful convictions? We prevent them by enforcing that burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Remember, I told you back in jury selection, if I'm the state and I'm trying to involuntarily take your child away from you or involuntarily have you committed to a mental institution, on a scale of 1 to 10, everybody said they would want a 10. And that is under a clear and convincing evidentiary standard, which is a lower burden of proof than proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Deliver your verdict with a clear conscience. How do you deliver your verdict with a clear conscience? You do that by enforcing the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. What does it feel like? Well, maybe you thought you locked the door, you forgot to go back and check the door handle, you're driving off, and you have a nagging feeling. If you have any sort of nagging feeling, you do not have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Finally, I want to take on this notion that it must be true because the state says so. And why else would the state be investing all this time, money, and resources? Well, that assumes that the state is altruistic or the state is selfless. But the state has motives. Their motive is to justify 1, the arrest, and 2, the filing of the indictment. The state is a plaintiff. The state filed a lawsuit against Sarah. Sarah is not on trial. The state is on trial.
Your Honor, this is a misstatement of the law.
Move on.
The state is on trial because they are a plaintiff and they filed a lawsuit
Objection,
against
Your
Sarah.
Honor, this is a misstatement of the law.
Sustained. This is a criminal case. Move on.
The state has to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. The burden for the state is a high burden. It's such a high burden because the very principles upon which this government were founded are at stake: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Also, the law provides that a person who omits to commit an act does not commit an offense and has no duty to act. Page 2 of your jury charge. A person is criminally responsible if the result would not have occurred but for her conduct. Conduct includes an act, omission, or possession. A person who omits to perform an act does not commit an offense unless the law provides that the omission is an offense or otherwise provides that she has a duty to perform the act. With respect to murder, the law does not provide that an omission is an offense or otherwise provides that she has a duty to act. Every offense, it requires conduct, either 1, an act, 2, omission, or 3, possession. The law is unequivocally clear that Sarah's failure to render aid or assistance is not a crime. Notice this was law enforcement's initial theory. That's why Detective Rocks was initially charging this case as a criminally negligent homicide. Notice that Jeannie, she told Detective Rocks in that January 9, 2023 email that Sarah had intentionally left Joe to die. Not that Sarah administered insulin to Joe. She didn't allege that because there's absolutely no proof. None. Notice that it's even law enforcement's false belief that Sarah had a duty to act. Officer Yeatman told you so, but that's not the law. The law is unequivocally clear that Sarah's failure to render aid or assistance is not a crime. It's not good practice, period. It's not good practice, period. However, the law unequivocally provides that it does not make her criminally liable. We discussed back in jury selection, what if I was a surgeon, the only board certified surgeon, Chambers County, we're rubbernecked on the highway, I see a man dying on the side of the road. I choose to go ahead and keep driving and go play golf rather than render aid or assistance to that man. Detective Rocks cannot come back and prosecute me. Am I a bad person? Yes. But Sarah is not on trial for being a bad person. She's on trial for allegedly administering insulin. Her kids told you that she's a bad person, but that does not make you a murderer. She's on trial for murder, not for being a bad person. The policy behind that law is that we should only hold people criminally responsible for what they do, not from what they omit to do. Thus, Sarah can only be held responsible for Joe's death if it's proven beyond a reasonable doubt that she administered insulin to him. And one, she didn't do that. And two, there's no proof, none. The prosecutor even told you that. In closing, the state knows this. That's why they want you to focus on all of this unsubstantiated innuendo. So, looking at the charge, you are not to consider evidence of such a wrongful act at all unless you find beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant did in fact commit the wrongful act. Even if you find that the defendant committed a wrongful act, you may consider the evidence only for the limited purpose I have described. You may not consider this evidence to prove that the defendant is a bad person and for this reason was likely to commit the charged offense. The state is like a magician. We all like magic. It's cool, but magic is not real. What does a magician do? They have you look over there while they deceive you while they're doing something over here. It's the sleight of hand, smoke and mirrors. What did the state do? They trotted her children in to call her a bad person. The state wants you to look at all of this unsubstantiated innuendo because they have no evidence that Sarah administered insulin to Joe. We spent half of these days on extraneous offenses, calling Sarah a bad person, but they still can't prove that Sarah administered insulin to Joe. How many people testified to extraneous offenses? What, like 20? How many people testified that Sarah administered insulin to Joe? 0. They have presented no theory. The closest they got is Miss Vargas's concoction that Sarah administered some potion to Joe. But wait, it was the hospital that administered benzos to Joe. The second closest was last week in the middle of trial. Miss Castaneda told Miss Vargas that Sarah had told her that she put something foul in water that Sarah gave to Joe. But she didn't tell the police that. She didn't put that in her sworn affidavit. She just brought that up conveniently in the middle of trial. First, the state cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt any of these extraneous offenses. FBI investigation into Heather Donahue, no arrest. The assistant U.S. attorney concluded it didn't happen. That's why he didn't indict it. All he needed was probable cause. David George recanted and said Sarah wasn't involved. Notice that David George didn't say he wasn't involved, just that Sarah wasn't. Grandmother's house fire, no arrest. The police and fire marshals investigated and concluded Sarah was not at fault. Titus commercial, gasoline on house, no arrest. Law enforcement did nothing. Titus's wife was never brought up in the statement to Detective Rocks. It only came up for purposes of trial. Brian Altus house fire, no arrest. Law enforcement and insurance company concluded an electrical outlet caught on fire. David Bragg, no arrest. The district attorney in investigation concluded it was self-defense. The self-defense determination is ironclad. The fact that the state is so off base on the self-defense shows you how the state is so off base here. Go back and read that. That is an ironclad letter that the county attorney provided. He said he reviewed the whole case. And you know what? What Sarah said happened actually matched the evidence on the scene. The projectiles from that letter matched exactly what Sarah said took place. Second, none of these extraneous acts can be used to conclude that Sarah is a bad person and is more likely to have committed the offense. Ask yourself, why did the state spend so much time on evidence that has nothing to do with the indictment? Because the state's own indictment tells you, after all the investigation, the state can't prove that Sarah administered insulin to Joe. In fact, they put that the manner and means are unknown. Why didn't they put in the indictment that the manner and means was due to Sarah administering insulin to Joe? One, they can't prove it. And two, they want you to contemplate convicting her on her failure to act. But the jury charge tells you you can't do that. Let's look at the real evidence. We learned that Joe and Sarah, they had been together for approximately 13 months. The family hated Sarah. Helen had a World War III with Sarah, and that was, quote, the end of the road. Jeannie also had a World War III with Sarah, and she conceded to you that she, quote, hated Sarah. Now
Okay, so Helen is the victim's mother, Helen Hartsfield, and Jeannie is the victim's sister, and they both testified. And apparently, I mean, the state could say the opposite, that Sarah hated her own fifth husband, Joseph Hartsfield, and his family, and that she isolated him. Now, it is interesting that in this trial, because it's definitely not the norm, Sarah's past was allowed in, and there weren't convictions. It was just like past allegations. That is very interesting. So if I just researched it, it says, while prior bad acts are generally inadmissible to prove character, to show someone acted in conformity with past behavior, exceptions exist when the evidence serves a specific purpose, like proving intent or rebutting a defense. The court's decision to allow this evidence would have been carefully considered, likely after pretrial motions and all of the hearings and all of that, which they did. The judge allowed that in. So the allegations of arson attempts, the allegations of domestic abuse, her children saying that she was abusive and they all want nothing to do with her, all of that was allowed in, So, yeah, that was definitely interesting. The jury, either way, after hearing all the evidence, which we've not been able to hear, all we could do is read about it, and we can watch closing arguments and the verdict. But everything the jury saw, they deliberated for 1 hour. Only 1 hour, came back with a guilty verdict.
Know that on December 26 of 2022, Sarah had a breast implant removed. She got out of the hospital on December 28th of 2022, and she was prescribed a lot of serious pain medication, 1 hydrocodone, 2 Valium, and 3 gabapentin. She also had a drain on the left side of her body, which made it difficult for her to move. She came home and she got into a fight with Joe. She was so upset with Joe because the house was a mess. This led to Joe aimlessly driving around. Jeannie told Joe, you can't do that. You have severe diabetes, you go up and down, you need stability. So she implored Joe to come home, which Joe did. Now, Joe was unquestionably thinking about going separate ways from Sarah, including opening a personal bank account. Joe didn't fear death or that he would be killed by Sarah. This is evidenced by the fact that he went home and stayed there. But his family did express concerns to Joe based on that prior self-defense death and the FBI incident involving David George. That's why Joe left that voicemail in a joking manner that he didn't get shot. Now, it is possible that in between December 29th and January 6th, they reconciled. But we don't know that. In fact, we do know that Sarah was making other plans as well, but the bottom line is that we don't know if they were going to definitively divorce. In fact, Joe's own mother told you that when she was at the hospital and she told Sarah that Joe was going to divorce you, she was shocked.
But yet Sarah, had posted on Facebook that one needs an exit strategy, and to make that happen, something along those lines. So that is why he's saying that Sarah was making her own plans. Oh, damn, who was husband number 6 gonna be? Because she would definitely, based on her patterns, be eyeing someone new already.
January 6, 2023, Sarah was still on her pain meds. Joe returned early in the morning from work, and he went to a job interview in the Woodlands, returning home in the early afternoon. He ate rice, broccoli, and cheese that Sarah made him, and he went to bed. Sarah did say that she passed to him her long and short acting insulin pens. Joe's diabetes, according to Dr. Knight, was, quote, very severe and, quote, very uncontrolled. His own family and Dr. Inakua all agreed that he had severe diabetes. Ladies and gentlemen, he was hospitalized 3 times overnight for being DKA. This wasn't like his dad, who, remember, his dad was hypoglycemic, and he literally had, he got helped in the EMS vehicle. No, Joe had to go to a hospital overnight 3 times to literally save his life. 2 of these overnight hospital visits were within 1 year of his passing. The state and these professionals, they argue, oh, he was just scared of being low. No, that's not the explanation. The explanation is that he did not give a you-know-what. In fact, he should have just been scared running high, considering that he was hospitalized 3 times, including twice within the year of his passing.
Not for it being low, though, right? Our roadmap said she thought she was the beneficiary on his life insurance, but he had changed it to his ticket. Not this case. It's reported that that was part of the evidence, unless you tell me if there's another source or send me the link. But from everything I've read and researched, all the reports say at the trial, that was part of the state's evidence that she was the beneficiary on his life insurance. It would have been a huge motive. If he had changed it to his kids, that would be amazing. But I think she was so swiftly arrested, I mean, she didn't get it either way. I know that Corey Richards thought that in that case, where she also is accused of poisoning her husband, right? So that's another case we're following. I've got a playlist for us as well. But yeah, life insurance, oh my goodness, she couldn't be more cliched.
Joe, he lived his life like he didn't have severe diabetes, which is exactly why he was also suffering from severe complications, such as 1, heart issues, 2, peripheral neuropathy, 3, sleep apnea, and 4, intestinal issues. Dr. Nakawa even noted that although he normally ran high, she had to closely monitor Joe because there was a risk of severe hypoglycemia. So up here you can see the patient required frequent, I'm going to read it, it's really difficult. The patient required frequent adjustment of medication and close monitoring due to risk of severe hypoglycemia and that's from the 7/15/2022 date you can see. She put it again in another record. This is from the 9/29/22 visit Joe had. Patient required frequent adjustment of insulin regimen and close monitoring due to risk of severe hypoglycemia. This is because she was administering him high amounts of insulin and she feared insulin resistance. So here on 7/15/22, his insulin requirement is very high and raises suspicion of insulin resistance. 7/29/22, uncontrolled type 1 diabetes for many years, his insulin requirement is very high, which raises suspicions of insulin resistance. 9/29/22, his insulin requirement is very high, which raises suspicion of insulin resistance. 11/29/22, DM1, which is type 1 diabetes, low C peptide, peptide with high insulin resistance. This led to her prescribing high amounts of insulin and metformin, which medication made him even more sensitive to insulin. Dr. Knight confirmed to you as well that he was receiving a high dosage of insulin. In fact, the last time she saw him, Dr. Nakawa, she increased the insulin amounts even higher, doubled his metformin, and told him to email her once a week, no doubt to monitor that high dosage of insulin. So clinical notes, increased Lantus 40 units twice a day based on his report of 60 daily, not improving his BG, blood glucose. I asked him to email me once a week. Ask yourself, how often have you ever had a doctor, or do you know of a doctor who wants you to contact them on a weekly basis? It's not Dr. Anakawa's fault. She was basing the amount of insulin she gave based upon Joe's words and the fact that he was persistently running high. Now notice, she did testify that if someone is not taking their insulin and all of a sudden starts taking their prescribed amounts, it could, quote, cause hypoglycemia. Question. If somebody's not taking their insulin and then all of a sudden starts taking the prescribed insulin amounts, what sort of effect does that have on a person? Answer. It could cause hypoglycemia. She then added on her own, quote, so if they go from taking only, for example, 20 units, they start to take 40 twice a day, they would have hypoglycemia. Quote, so if they go from taking only, for example, 20 units, they start to take 40 twice a day, they would have hypoglycemia. She also added, this was unquestioned, she added this, quote, Lantus is once a day always, regardless of the dose. But if I gave him 80 once a day and he has hypoglycemia, it would be difficult to reverse. Sometimes when we split the long-acting, the low hypoglycemia. So if I gave him Lantus is once a day always, regardless of the dose. But if I gave him 80 once a day and he has hypoglycemia, it would be difficult to reverse. Notice, this is exactly what happened to Joe. Now, those long and short-acting insulin pens, they have units that you have to dial. We don't know how much long-term or short-term acting insulin that Joe administered. We see that Joe, he turned into hyperglycemia, high, and he took his long and short-acting insulin. Notice how he fell precipitously. Quite frankly, he could have taken that 80 units of Lantus in one dose. We don't know. We don't know. But we do know that Dr. Nakawa said that if you're not taking your insulin, you can become hypoglycemic if you start using your insulin as prescribed. Also, Dr. Inakawa, she conceded to you that she was prescribing an irreversible amount of insulin should Joe become hypoglycemic. And notice, Dr. Inakawa was not some hired gun. I didn't go out and go find some expert to present a novel theory. She was a fact witness here in this case. In fact, she called Joe even an expert in managing his diabetes. I think each and every one of you know that he is anything but an expert in how he managed his diabetes. Now, we definitively don't know that Sarah administered insulin to Joe. Ms. Vargas has told you that, even in closing. After all the evidence, she told you. We don't know. However, Sarah is adamant that she didn't. She says that when she found him unconscious, she telephoned for emergency assistance. She says she found him at 1 o'clock to 1:30, and it's true that she did call at 2 o'clock. But she wasn't sure of the time. Her husband is on his deathbed, and Sarah is not expecting a murder charge. Deputy Yeatman responds to the hospital, and they are all accusing Sarah without any evidence of having murdered Joe. Helen states, well, nobody was upset with Sarah. Jeannie says she never accused Sarah. But the bottom line is they all accused Sarah because they hated her. Detective Rocks never considered that Joe did this to himself. That wasn't investigated, period. There's no doubt about that. This is why the state wants you to focus on all the extraneous acts, because they surely don't want you to focus on the complete lack of an investigation. As a community, do we want our police prosecuting our families and our neighbors based on accusations with no evidence, based on an accusation without an investigatory foundation? This absolutely harks back to jury selection, where I told you, show me the man and I'll show you the crime. This prosecution is based solely upon accusations of family members who hated Sarah, and they made suppositions based upon Sarah's past. But you can't do that. It's in the charge that in a court of law, we don't allow prior alleged acts to show that a person is a bad person and is thus more likely to have committed the offense. Here we are at court, and it's still not figured out. That is, there's no proof that Sarah administered insulin. Sarah cooperates with law enforcement. She provides a statement that, by the way, the state objected to me showing you, and agrees with law enforcement to let them search her home, where she provided another statement, which the state didn't show you. I showed you. Lieutenant Hemingway in the state apparently is appalled that she left her husband to let them in, but they ordered her to do so. They told her, come let us in. She tried to let them in remotely. That didn't work, so she had to use her key. Rox, again, doesn't do any investigation whatsoever. She doesn't preserve the crime scene. In fact, she doesn't initiate a crime scene. She doesn't collect any evidence whatsoever. She doesn't collect any pens. She doesn't call a crime scene technician to the scene to preserve the scene. We didn't get to test any of those pens for fingerprints or DNA. Rox didn't do an investigation because her mind is made up to charge Sarah with attempted criminal negligent homicide. Why did she choose that theory? Because she can't prove the administration of insulin. But she can prove that Sarah didn't act based upon the Dexcom records. The problem with that theory is it's not a crime. It's not.
Quick pause. Book Mama, you said, sorry I'm late. We were celebrating my birthday. Happy birthday to you. Thank you for being here to watch this with us. I hope that you had a fantastic day. And thank you so much for always being here and for your support. Okay, here we go.
Note that Officer Yeatman told you when they were in the house that there were only 2 insulin pens by Joe. Note that Lieutenant Hemingway told you that Sarah brought the other insulin pens to the nightstand. So, what were the bedside tables like? The one side I remember, I believe, was the right side of the bed, had a bottle of prescription pills. I do not recall what they were. And then I believe the boxes of insulin were on that nightstand as well. Were they insulin pens? I believe so, yes. And I won't hold you to it. I'm not going to quiz you, but about how many insulin pens were there? 2.
Why does he do this? Squatting down to read the laptop. The laptop's not, is it plugged in? Maybe it is. Maybe this is the cable here. Sir, can't you take it with you? I don't know if that's so effective in getting across whatever information he's trying to share here with the jury. You know what I mean? Is it an effective way to communicate? I'm not sure it's coming across that way, but okay.
So with your belief of that, you're saying that it was just those 2 pens that caused Joe's death? No. Okay. Were there any other pens that y'all found? Not that I found specifically, or any other pens that you saw. When we were at the house, I saw where the insulin was kept in the fridge. Okay. So you only saw those pens in the fridge, and then 2 other pens, correct? I believe so. Yes. Okay. Did she talk about moving his insulin pens? Yes. She said that she had collected a bunch of empty pens around the house and brought them and put in his nightstand, which kind of goes against her earlier statement saying that she's the one that keeps the house tidy and in place and everything. They didn't initiate a crime scene. They didn't preserve the crime scene. We don't know if those 2 pens were full or empty or anything about the other pens, whether they be on the nightstand or in the fridge. At the hospital, yes. Sarah refuses to allow the family to see Joe. However, they're all falsely accusing her of murder. How would any person feel falsely accused of such a heinous act? Irate, indignant. On top of that, Jeannie is calling Sarah the B word and telling her, quote, "You better keep walking." They were kicked out of the hospital. Now, we don't dispute that Joe died from hypoglycemia. I don't dispute that. But he also did have a heart attack. Remember, Ms. Vargas told you in closing just a second ago, the medical records are clear. They are clear. 16 from Dr. Kakashani. Could be due to hypoxia/hypoglycemia, cannot exclude a stroke. Page 179 of the medical records. Page 260 of the medical records. Clinical history, stroke, follow-up. Page 263. What I highlighted there is very detailed, but I'm going to actually go a few sentences down to the non-highlighted. He has deteriorated. Prognosis is very poor, unlikely to improve beyond this. The reason for this presentation was stroke and hypoglycemia as well. So, it was never investigated when the heart attack took place and the effect it had on Joe's death. Sarah labeling this as a stroke continuously is a defensive mechanism for a false accusation of murder. After all, we do have an ME report that explains the manner of death is undetermined.
Sir, did you hear what he just said? That his client, Sarah Hartsfield, was claiming that husband number 5 died from a stroke because that was a defense mechanism because she was being falsely accused. How would you guys feel if husband number 5's family is being so rude to you? You wouldn't let them in either, right? I don't think so. Nobody's saying that. No, you put your personal issues aside. Okay, it's not kindergarten. The man was on his deathbed, and she didn't let his family say goodbye to him, nor did she let them attend his funeral. So yeah, I think that also speaks volumes, right? Okay.
Manner of death, undetermined. That was signed off by the ME's boss, and it was peer-reviewed. We see down there, this case was presented and reviewed at the weekly Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences Quality Assurance and Peer Review Conference on March 15th of 2023. Regarding Joe's heart, it is important to note that one coronary artery was blocked 90 to 95%. Another coronary artery was blocked 60 to 70%. And that's straight under atherosclerotic coronary artery disease. That's right from the ME report. Thus, she concluded that Joe had atherosclerotic coronary artery disease. It's right there. Dr. Inakawa, she explained to you that this is the type of heart attack that is caused by diabetes. Question. Okay, and what is that called when that, is that a medical term for stroke? That is ischemic stroke, infarctive stroke. When the block is, the blood vessel that feeds the brain with oxygen gets blocked because of the effect of high sugar. Okay, and what is that called again? Ischemic, okay. And I'm gonna mispronounce this, but what's the difference between that and atherosclerotic? It's the same thing. Atherosclerotic. In accordance with the ME report, Joe suffered from comorbidities that Dr. Inakawa, she described. Question. What sort of effects does type 1 diabetes have on a person after 26 years? It depends on too many factors. If it's controlled, not controlled, is there any other comorbidities, smoking, other habits? There's too many factors. But after that long of diabetes not controlled, I expect some complications like stroke, heart attack, blockages in the legs, high bleeding, something called neuropathy. All of this is what Joe suffered from. The conclusion from the ME report has to remain unchanged. Comment. The classification of cause and manner of death is, in any case, is based on a combination of autopsy findings and investigative information, including circumstances and history. In this case, the decedent, a 46-year-old white male, was found unresponsive in bed on January 7, 2023, was transported to Houston Methodist Baytown Hospital, was pronounced dead on January 15, 2023. After review of investigative information, including medical records and results of laboratory testing performed at Quest Diagnostic, described above, the cause of death is classified as complications of toxic effects of insulin. At the time of the writing of this report, the circumstances surrounding the death are unclear, particularly regarding the administration of the insulin in the decedent. In addition, the law enforcement investigation is still ongoing. Should additional information become available, the manner of death may be reevaluated and appropriately amended. Notice that the ME report leaves open the possibility of changing her opinion if, quote, should additional pertinent information become available. Ask yourself back there, what additional pertinent information did the state present to the ME? The answer, again, is none. Again, the only additional information is the extraneous acts, but that is the sleight of hand. They want you to focus over there instead of here, the indictment. Like you believe in magic, they believe in her guilt. But just like magic, it's not real. Nothing has changed. There is no evidence that Sarah administered insulin to Joe. The state cannot even tell you the manner and means. They can't. They're literally throwing the kitchen sink at the wall and hoping something sticks. Well, oh well, Sarah could have given him benzos and ropinirole and Benadryl. There's no evidence of that. Well, the hospital gave him benzos. Also, Joe could have taken benzos recreationally. There's no evidence that he did that, but there's no evidence that Sarah administered any of that. Moreover, Dr. Knight explained that ropinirole doesn't make you tired. There's no evidence of a struggle? None. Joe was much stronger than Sarah, a woman who had just had a surgery. It is on a cocktail of narcotics. I mean, sticking a needle in somebody, you're going to feel that and react. If Sarah's sticking a needle in him, how does he not react to that? If I throw a dead body right here, right now, you want to know who, when, why, how. All of that is inexplicable based upon the evidence we have. Every doctor here that testified was aware that people have died from hypoglycemia. Granted, they didn't say it was common, but never in the manner in which the state asserts that Joe died. In fact, Dr. Inakawa praised Dexcom for saving lives because people go to sleep, become hypoglycemic, and have a resulting severe medical issue or die. All of this means, from totally inconclusive evidence, it is more probable that Joe accidentally did this to himself. Joe had uncontrolled diabetes and severe medical issues and was prescribed a lot of insulin, which he hadn't been taking. And on top of that, he was taking medication which made him even more sensitive to the administration of insulin, that is, the metformin. Dr. Inakwa told you that the amounts of insulin Joe had could make him hypoglycemic if he had been non-compliant, which he was, and a mere 80 units of Lantus would be irreversible. Also here, we are, like Detective Rocks wanted and ensured, after only mere accusations from family members without evidence who hated Sarah, with a predetermined investigation that was so lackluster that they didn't even preserve the scene or collect any evidence. Evidence was made up, literally in the middle of trial by them. This water drink, in the middle of trial, this comes up. Oh, well, Sarah told me that that there was something in water and it smelled foul, and she made Joe drink it. That came up in the middle of trial. The mix of pills, that's made up. A packed suitcase, that's totally made up. It wasn't in the police report. Do you not think it's a big deal if somebody has a packed suitcase and you don't put that in the police report? You don't take a picture of that? Sarah absolutely did not commit this crime. Here, there's still, as I told you at the beginning of this trial, Ms. Vargas confirmed it. Closing. There still is no evidence, literally none, that Sarah administered insulin. The record is replete with doubt. Render a verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
Ms. Vargas.
State's rebuttal coming up. And then the jury went out. They came back in within 1 hour. And they're like, guilty. Completely guilty. Totally guilty. And then the judge is like, oh, okay, come back tomorrow. Let's deliberate on what sentence you'd recommend. They're like, life without parole. Yeah. So the other evidence they saw certainly pointed directly at Sarah Hartsfield, especially her lies of I was fast asleep. I had no idea that 100 alarms were going off about my husband's low blood sugar, husband number 5. No, I didn't know. I was asleep. I was on my own medication. None of that. And then yet the cell phone evidence shows, damn, but you were texting, ordering groceries, premeditating the 911 call, not even making it, telling someone, I'm going to make a 911 call because he's actually not good at managing his diabetes. Yeah, okay, that phone was so damning. And apparently when they were, I think it was in the hospital, when the detective already had a search warrant for her phone, but said to her, I'm going to need to take your phone. And she said, do you have to take it? Or like, do you have a search warrant? He's like, well, actually, yes, I do have a search warrant. Give me your phone. She said, oh, crap. When they were about to take her phone, she said, oh, crap. Yeah, she knew that phone is going to have a lot of evidence on it, and it most certainly did. Okay, so now let's watch the state's rebuttal. Here we go.
Your final argument.
So just so that you know, for timing, if you're watching live with me, we've got about 45 minutes left of the closing arguments to watch, which will all be the state's rebuttal. Then we're going to watch the verdict, which is a very quick clip, of course, where they're going to say guilty, right? And then we will watch the press conference quickly, which is about 14 minutes or so long, of the post-verdict press conference. Okay, so we're still going to be here for a little while.
Hey, Mom, it's me. I just called to let you know everything's fine. I went home, prepared to be shot, but it didn't happen. Anyway, I love you. I'll talk to you later. All right, bye.
That was days before she murdered him. Days. His family didn't make up this story in denial. That family was robbed of their sunshine. Or as the defendant described him, one of her horrible husbands. If I'm guilty of anything, it's picking horrible husbands. That's in those messages that she says to reporters. That's her own words to someone that's in this room. You don't get to leave her. She leaves you. You heard that. When Sarah met Joe, she moved quick. Spider meet the fly. The defendant tells anyone who will listen with her whole chest her motives for killing Joe. I'm amazed at all he was able to keep hidden, she says about Joe to journalist Mary Ellen Swishow. According to her, he was bleeding her dry. He was leaving her in financial ruin, like David Bragg, also dead. He was lying, he was stealing, he liked porn, he was a slob, he didn't take care of himself, he was sneaking around and buying stuff at the corner store, he was emotionally abusive, he refused to get it together with his diabetes. She didn't want to take care of an invalid. So instead of just leaving him, or better yet, letting him leave her, she did the most obvious and natural thing to her, and she murdered him. She is screaming her motive to anyone and everyone that will listen. She was tired of him. He was taking too much from her. And those are her words about her beloved husband. This is not a doting wife who lost the love of her life as she initially was acting. It's not the polished woman with the jewelry and the Bible. It's the expletive screaming, vindictive, manipulative, always planning, always calculating woman. It's the actress Sarah Hartsfield. The embittered woman that wasn't going to take his shit anymore. We talked about roles during voir dire, and now is the time when the rubber hits the road on your duties that you owe. It is your turn. It is your opportunity to right the wrong that's been done to Joseph Hartsfield. Evaluate not what I say, not what defense counsel says. Evaluate the evidence. Decide what you believe. And you took an oath to listen to the evidence presented to you and to make your decision based accordingly. And as stated in the jury charge, your sole job right now is to determine guilt or innocence of the indictment. That's it. I've tried some cases that are what you could be called he said, she said's, and it's generally assaults. And juries can sometimes struggle with that because in those cases, they're having to figure out, was there even a crime? Did something happen here? But we know something happened here. A man is no longer with us in his own home, killed by what can only be described as his worst nightmare. And the only person with him in that home is her. And the only way you can describe their relationship, if you read through the text messages, is that she had utter contempt for him. She knew he was trying to leave. She had a habit of doing real specific things whenever people tried to leave her. There were a lot of signs in this case. She waited as he lay dying for hours, almost an entire day, to call 911. She didn't want to ride in that ambulance. She was worried about her car. She didn't seem upset that he was dying. She seemed intent on punishing his family. She was obsessed with them. It's all she could talk about, that and forcing the stroke narrative, and then talking about how much of a pig and a piece of crap her beloved husband was. She copy and pasted nasty messages about his family and sent them out to anyone that would listen. And defense counsel told you in his opening statement, defendant gave Joe the insulin before he went to sleep. She wrote it too. They've already admitted to her handling the murder weapon repeatedly. Of course, she's not going to admit to doing it, but my God, how rare is it that we have this much evidence and the defendant literally admits to giving the murder weapon to the victim. Joe had benzos in his system when he got to the hospital, prior to the hospital administering them. I went through that in painstaking detail with Dr. Agogo. It's in the medical records. That was not given to him prior to him getting there. The defendant admitted to giving him Repinerol and Benadryl, which you heard testimony can cause you to go to sleep. It can make you drowsy. Joe, who wouldn't even take a Tylenol, had 3 medications in him. 3 medications in him, and all of them, you saw on the medical charts the defense counsel showed you, were prescribed to her. She had Valium, she had Repinerol, and she had Benadryl. And the defense counsel's own questions to Deputy Yateman phrased it perfectly. Narcotics like Valium can cause you to be very drowsy. They put you, and he said this, in a weakened state. Now, he was, of course, talking about helpless Sarah. But isn't that just what she did to Joe? Drug him, overdose him, wait for irreparable brain damage, wait till he's throwing up. Well, now he's thrown up, so that's kind of obvious. So now I have to pretend like I'm a caring wife, call 911. But first, Facebook. Remember what she warned the family in World War III? Pardon my language, but she said, "You'll never fucking see him again." She might not be a woman of her word, but she is a woman of her threats. According to the defendant, he also didn't want to eat it, but she made him his favorite food. This is the food that she knew would shoot his blood sugar straight up. But she made it for him, and he didn't want to eat it. And she says he didn't want to eat it, and I forced him to eat it. Is that how she got him to take all that medicine that Joe Hartsfield wouldn't have taken on his own? Defense counsel wants you to think that Joe was so non-compliant that he regularly took his insulin after he ate and before he went to bed. But in Dr. Anakwa's records, the note that he took the medicine after meals was information provided by her. She tells law enforcement that this man is utterly incapable. She can't leave him alone for even a little bit. He is just that helpless. He just needs her so much. And yet, she leaves him for chunks at a time. She acted like there was no life insurance. And sure enough, there was, and she was acutely aware of it, and also that she was the beneficiary on it. She hated his children. She hated his family. She didn't want him to have any connection with them, but he did. He just couldn't help but exist and make her angry. The defendant told law enforcement at her home that she and Joe had together decided to cut his family out of his life. And you heard that message. That boy loved his mama. You think he was going to cut her out of his life for her? She said in her own words, she's a behavioral analyst in the military. She's an intelligence analyst in the military. Now, I don't know what she was because those are 2 different things. She's something. Defense truly cannot have Joseph's death related to low blood sugar, because in trying to cover her tracks, defendant repeatedly, consistently, obsessively said that it wasn't. So much so that she put it in his obituary. How many times are we reading an obituary of someone and we're curious what happened to him, but it's never in there, but it was in the one she wrote? That's why defense counsel has to try and confuse you with medical testimony when his neurologist and the medical examiner spoke unequivocally. He did not have a stroke that caused this. He had prolonged hypoglycemia that went untreated for too long because she sat there, she farted around, and she let it kill his brain. She caused it, and then she made sure it was irreversible. And sometimes that looks like a stroke, and you heard that very clearly. Sometimes it mimics a stroke. It looks like it, but that's not what she was dealing with. You have other signs. Her talking to her own daughter, this isn't a threat. How often do you feel like something's not a threat when someone precedes it with saying, this isn't a threat? What else does she say? As soon as I knew he was in trouble, I did everything I could to save him. Actions speak louder than words. Defendant said that to Ashley, but what a farce. She tells the hospital he didn't do drugs, and there's no indication of such. But then she accuses him of using cocaine and meth, and nowhere is it documented in hospital records of that. But she says, oh, the hospital told me his heart looked like a drug user. Maybe that's why all this was going on. She wasn't concerned about helping her husband dying. She was concerned about orchestrating her defense. The video cameras don't work, but then suddenly, wait, I do have this image where his face looks kind of off, so I'm going to go ahead and send that to try to convince the medical examiner to find something that is not supported by medical diagnoses and science. Defendant said, oh crap, when asked for her phone. She didn't want to give it up. She didn't want to turn it over. And now we know why, right? Because that's where some of the most damning evidence comes from. She's allegedly asleep. We know he's in the bed dying. And somehow, unconscious Joe, who's been laying there for hours, his phone sends this to the defendant, which she immediately saves to her phone, the new bank account, and his driver's license. It's almost like she knew he was going to die, right? The Apple legacy account. She knew he was going to die because she made sure of it. How can she possibly feign ignorance after this? The Facebook messages with flat out lies about his blood sugar. Oh, he's been low lately. When his doctor and the data shows exactly the contrary. She deleted the text messages that she sent to her daughter when she was supposed to be asleep an hour and a half before she calls 911. And you know her butt is in the room with him because she's videoing him probably gasping for his last waking breaths. But first, Facebook, let me go tell Carlene I'm gonna call 911. Thank God she did, I guess. Defendant tells a journalist there's no smoking gun in jail messages, but isn't every single one of her acts a smoking gun? When law enforcement went back into the house with an arrest warrant, she had a suitcase packed. And while defense would quibble with the integrity and credibility of Detective Rocks, she said it's in the body camera. You could watch the body camera. But because it wasn't in her report, don't focus on it. She says he's the perfect husband. We have a good marriage. We weren't worried about divorce. And then all of a sudden, when the evidence is mounting, he is an abusive, drug-addicted, porn-loving, slobby piece of crap. And he's a thief whose family was the root of all evil. His family was worried, and they had every right to be. What a wild... I didn't have time to summarize all the evidence to you. There's not enough time in the day for me to go through it. But what a wild coincidence that no person can leave her without violent consequences. What a wild coincidence that as he is fighting for his life, she is setting this up. What a wild coincidence that she is setting up an alibi, a defense over Facebook while he was dying. While he was laying there and she was ordering groceries, bringing him inside, putting him on the table, recording him. As he laid dying, she laid planning. As investigators build the case, how coincidental that she packs a suitcase. And the irony, or tragedy rather, is that she wasn't happy either. And if she had just let him leave, none of us would be here today. She could have just let him go, but the spider doesn't let go of the fly. She's always working. We've laid out our cards. I'm not trying to hide things from you. I am trying to move things more quickly. I'm not trying to put on our witnesses in the best light. There are issues that we've had to address. And I can Monday morning quarterback, I can armchair quarterback all day on any given case things I wish that law enforcement can do. But it doesn't change the reality of this case. She admitted to handling the evidence, and she handled the evidence in front of the officers. And the cup, I can't say honestly that I care about, because what would that show you? She told them there was no video, but now we're mad at the officers for believing her. Defendant's actions, unfortunately, did impact law enforcement's decisions, and I wish that I could go back and I could have them collect those things, if for no other reason than to foreclose asinine arguments like that. But I'm not going to hide behind the fact that I do wish that they had gotten that evidence. But it doesn't change the medical examiner's testimony. It doesn't change her messages. It doesn't change her actions. You heard from the medical examiner. It is not their duty to determine how someone was injected with so much insulin to the point that they overdose. That is y'all's job. That is why that blank is left open. The medical examiner told you it would take something drastic, like a video of how the insulin was administered, for them to be able to do that. But it doesn't take that for y'all. You said out there it doesn't take that for y'all. At the very beginning of trial in voir dire, I showed you that picture. And we talked about the puzzle. And you all agreed that you do not look at evidence in a vacuum. You got it then, like you get it now. And the evidence is clear. And sometimes I have to rely on just one person's testimony. But that's not the case here. I'm not relying on a witness. I'm relying on y'all to have listened, to have paid attention. You heard from Detective Rocks. This case had more evidence tying the defendant to committing the offense than any she's ever had before. You heard who did it. Sarah. You heard where it happened. Chambers County. You heard when it happened. You can see when she did it. You know what happened. There were signs. Defense counsel said in their opening that Detective Rocks arrested the defendant immediately, but you know that's not true. She wasn't just some detective on a power trip doing a quick investigation. Detective Rocks did an incredibly thorough investigation. And while there is always room for improvement, I have no doubt how many people are going to tell me how much better I could have done on this. But that woman was on her first call out as a detective, and she did, from my perspective, an incredible job balancing the rights of the defendant a thorough investigation, and the safety of our community. Keeping an eye towards justice. To drag her and to make this investigation worthless because she didn't get something that would have already had evidence on it, it's just another misdirection. Focus on the whole, not the whole picture. And I'm always cautious in opening because I want you to have a roadmap, but I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. I never know if a witness is going to become unavailable or just not cooperative. I don't know if they're going to remember everything or something else. It's always something in trial, and you saw that happen in the course of this trial, but I don't want my overpromises to you to mean that a killer goes free. But defense counsel sure did oversell. And they authoritatively told you that he died of something other than what he died of. Dr. Bainan, the medical examiner, was clear. She held his brain in her hand, and she knows what killed him. And she knows, and she told you that he did not have a stroke. I don't know what else you want. Defense counsel wants you to hold it against Joe's sister that she let the police know what she thought, and wants to argue with a grieving family member about the word accusation. But isn't it a little ridiculous to not expect your sister to fight like hell if they think that you're murdered? We could probably get a lot of college credit hours from the medical testimony that we heard. And all of it paints a really clear picture, even with some of the missing links the defense counsel wants you to focus on. She murdered him. And to theorize that this man, who was so terrified of low blood sugar that he DKA'd multiple times and would not comply for fear of being low, all of a sudden, when he was trying to leave the defendant, when he was scared of dying in his sleep, all of a sudden, he takes a bunch of drowsy-inducing medicine, overdoses himself on insulin, doesn't realize it, doesn't correct it, doesn't apparently respond to any of the things that defendant alleges that she did for him, apparently was mobile during the period when doctors said he wouldn't have been able to move around. It's just not reasonable. It's just not reasonable. It's an insult to your intelligence. The alerts went off over 100 times. She said she heard them. She had the alerts on her phone. So why would she say all that? Why would she tell on herself about the medicine? Because she knows reasonably that she's going to get looked at. And she's not dumb. She's actually quite smart. She does what I kind of do when I know that I've got some bad facts coming down the pike, and I address them. So what she did is weave them in. She tells one person one thing. She tells Aunt Nancy, well, I'll try to give him the water, and he said it tasted weird, just in case he wakes up. She tells law enforcement, well, I gave him I gave him his restless leg syndrome medicine and Benadryl. It wasn't his, it was hers. She weaves it in. So if she's caught, she says, well, I said it. I told him. I know as well as you do that what she did was intentional. What she did was knowing. What she did was unapologetic. The pieces that they try to put into the puzzle do not make sense. Defense counsel wants you to focus on the fact that he didn't eat right and he ran high, but he didn't die of running high. The defense counsel wants you to focus on the fact that Joe's family was concerned, and rightfully so. Defense counsel wants you to focus on the fact that they were pissed off, but not on why. Not on the fact that the defendant walks by and incites the family. The family that knew that he was getting isolated. They almost got him out. Y'all, they almost got him out. But it's a problem whenever Jeannie is venting to her family. Defense counsel wants you to think that Sarah was high as a kite, incapable of doing such, and also don't hold it against her too much that she didn't help him and that she let him lay there helpless for 20 hours because she was high and she was in a weakened state. But you saw her. She drove herself to the hospital. Couldn't even be bothered to ride in there with him. She's on Facebook. She was ordering groceries, making sure the groceries are on the table. She said, hold on a minute, Carlene, I gotta call 911. Then she tells reporters, I didn't ignore his Dexcom alerts. I was on my own pain regimen in another room. I was sleeping most of the day and night. What story is it? Sarah? I'm sorry that it's taken a long time to go through this, but when someone tells that many dang different stories to that many people, there's so many things that you don't get to know about even. Defense counsel wants you to focus on things that aren't part of the jury charge. Defense counsel wants you to focus on, in 15-minute conversations with detectives, a person doesn't say every single thing that they think of. She's supposed to be a pharmacy tech that was so involved with his medical care that she would call his work to tell him to get a shot. She would call his doctor to correct him in his medical records. But then she pretends like she doesn't even know what kind of insulin he has, what they do. Defense counsel wants you to focus on the fact that AUSA's rejected a solid case about David George and the defendant's murder plot. And they want you to focus on Douglas County prosecutors originally coming up with a reason for not prosecuting when there was conflicting evidence on David Bragg, but not on the fact that they reopened it. Defense counsel wants you to focus on the fact that law enforcement failed Titus controlled, but not that she was seen fleeing the scene. Defense counsel wants you to focus on an easy way out investigation, but not that the defendant left Brian Altus's home minutes before it caught on fire. Minutes after he rejects her. Defense counsel wants you to focus on wrongful convictions because that is terrifying. That's terrifying for me. That is horrifying. But they don't want you to focus on common sense. They don't want you to focus on the evidence. They don't want you to focus on probability. Defense counsel wanted you to focus on the burden, and I do too. My burden is a reasonable doubt. Defense counsel wants you to focus on duty of care, omission, but not on criminal responsibility. A person is criminally responsible if they cause the result. Defense counsel wants you to focus on elements that aren't there. You heard him add that, right? I can't prove my case to you if we don't know exactly how she got the insulin. That is not the law, ladies and gentlemen. But you aren't falling for that. That nagging feeling is not reasonable doubt if it's not reasonable. Defendant isn't charged with failure to render aid. Defendant is charged with murder. How much of defendant's clothes did he spend on the elements that he think we should have to prove? We spent 2 days on medical testimony, and we flew through extraneous offense testimony. Defense counsel has spent time with the experts on wild goose chases, like the sound of an alarm when the defendant's own words to multiple people are that she heard the alarms. What was the point of that? It is a distraction. Defense counsel wants you to think stroke and even continually tried to put that in the mouth of the neurologist. He wants you to focus on A1C, atherosclerosis, all of these things instead of the glaring issue that she overdosed him on insulin. Defense counsel said that the self-defense with regard to David Bragg was ironclad. When the detective told you it happened, it was reopened by the attorney. Defense counsel says there's no evidence in this case and doesn't want you to look over here. Defense counsel says that Detective Rocks rushed an investigation and pursued it only on the basis of the family ignoring that even in the medical charts, the doctors were concerned there was foul play. Who the heck else is administering the insulin other than her? "20 hours. That's how long he laid there, but they don't want you to focus on that because that makes what she did real obvious. So instead, he's got to create these false gotcha moments with witnesses about testimony that either isn't their subject matter or it's just a distraction to focus from the literal mountains of evidence in the case. But that is what skilled defense attorneys do, and he is top notch. They try to take holes and tell you that it's doubt. They try to take information that we'll never get to know because murderers aren't in the business of telling us how they do it, and they try to wedge into it and say, you can't convict because you don't know this. That is not the elements of the offense. But it is effective. It is scary. But don't fall for it. The reality is what they're complaining about doesn't even push the needle either way. It wouldn't have proven her innocent. Would it have proven her guilty? No, you saw her handling them in the video. She admitted to touching them. He said it in his opening. She couldn't have had better representation than him, but the spider just can't help itself. She's got to spin her webs. And every time she talks, it's something different. And it's just not believable. And we're never going to get the whole picture because she took that from us when she let him suffer from irreversible brain damage. What you have are the witnesses that were available to prosecution this week. What you have is the mounds of evidence that really she created. You'll never have the whole picture. But trying to make sense of a crime isn't like that. There is no reasonable doubt. If I tell you 2 plus blank equals 4, you know what that blank is. And some of you might be thinking, it could be 2 or it could be 1 plus 1. But either way, you know what's in that blank, right? It's 2 one way or another. She doesn't get away with this because she was kind of careful. Her story, the information presented to you, her story is exactly like what Hannah Williamson, her former best friend, felt about one of the other stories. It's ludicrous. How stupid does she think you are? Page 1 of the medical records. Hypoglycemic coma. Page 13, hypoglycemic coma. Page 27, hypoglycemic coma. Pages 128, 129, 132, 133, 150, 159. Did you notice when we were going through all this medical testimony, he didn't grill the neurologist the stroke questions. He grilled the ER doctor that. Did you notice that he asked Dr. Knight, the general practitioner, the diabetes questions, and he stood a little bit back on that from Dr. Inaqua. Notice how he grilled the cop about diabetes, but not the doctor treating Joe for it. Defense counsel knows who's been subpoenaed. They get that information, but what did they spend their time on, and who did they spend it with? Joe didn't have a DNR in place. And after intentionally introducing the amount of insulin into that man who was deathly afraid of insulin, so much so that she caused an overdose, his worst fears come to life. She takes it one step further and makes sure he's got a DNR. Even in recalling Dr. Inaqua, who testified that someone would have had to introduce that much insulin to his body, and it wouldn't be Joe. Defense tells you that there's no evidence. This is about possibility versus reasonableness. The trial is the state of Texas versus Sarah Hartsfield, but it's really bigger than that, isn't it? This is about what is okay in Chambers County. You may get away with devious, ingenious, devastating crimes like this in another county. You can really, really be skillful, premeditated, deliberate, and convincing in another state. And they may not have the investigators willing to spend countless hours in the trenches, or juries who demand to hold people accountable. But here, U12 can draw a hard line. In other places, people may get away with committing murder right in front of people's faces, but you don't have to do that here. There is no reasonable doubt. You know what happened in that video. You know what happened in that video, and you know what happened here. The only reasonable conclusion is that this person committed that crime, and it's your job to convict her, and it doesn't bring me joy to do that. I have no doubt that she has suffered in her life, but that doesn't absolve her of taking that man's life in the exact way that he was most fearful of. And defense counsel made very valid arguments about not trusting the government in voir dire. But you don't have to trust the government. You don't have to trust me to see that this is a crime. You just have to trust your own eyes, your ears, your gut, your instincts, your judgment. Sometimes it really is the most obvious answer. And when I showed you these elements, every single one of you said that you did not have a problem with this. And that's the case. We'll never get to know how she did it, because she orchestrated this whole thing. Joe had medications in his system by her own admission and by medical testimony and records that weren't prescribed to him when he wouldn't even take Tylenol. In voir dire, I asked you this question. There's only 2 people that could have administered this much insulin to him. There's absolutely no evidence that Joe did this to himself, and there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that the defendant did this intentionally and knowingly. And when I asked you this question, none of you raised your hand to say you weren't a 10. And if you don't hold her accountable, this is not going to stop. And I'm just going to tell you, if it's between my loved one or yours, I know who I hope it is. Here is me standing before you with more evidence than I have in an overwhelming amount of cases. And this is your opportunity to take these cases seriously. Y'all are the heartbeat of the community. And you can decide to take it seriously or to wash your hands of the victim and say something probably happened, but I'm not 100% sure, when you know darn good and well that is not the burden. Put yourself in his family's shoes. What would justice be for the woman who did this to him and then watched him? She recorded his breathing and made fun of it. And I hope that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. When I was a senior in high school, my stepdad was diagnosed with ALS, and that's Lou Gehrig's disease. And he survived for 5 years, and he was a heck of a fighter. And he went through more with that than, from my perspective, any mere mortal could. And in his last days in the hospital, he had bilateral pneumonia. At that point, he couldn't walk. He couldn't talk. He couldn't eat on his own. It's a terrible way to die. It really is. And he made the decision that he didn't want to be intubated. And we knew that that was the end. And the last moments of my dad's life, I'll never forget. They took everything off of him. And they had given him medicine so that he could go to sleep. And we were in the room, and I got to hold his hand. And a nurse sang him. It was like, it's surreal. I can still feel myself being back in that room. And I knew that my dad was dying. I knew that he couldn't breathe. And it was terrible, and it was painful, and it was one of the worst days of my life. But in that, it was also peaceful, and it was beautiful because he had made that decision, and we got to be there with him, and he was living on his own terms, and he was dying on his own terms. And this case has, if I'm being honest, really sucked for me, because she robbed Joe not just of his life, she robbed him of his death. And she robbed his family of that peace and of that goodbye. And for what? For what? Like, what was the point of her doing this? You've heard it from defense since voir dire. It's not her fault. He had these like other health issues. And as great of an attorney as Mr. Darwin is, and he is, it's plain as day. It wasn't ever about her duty to save him. It was about her duty not to cause his death, not to cause him needing to be saved. This is not a doctor missing golf to not help a stranger. This is a lying and murderous wife who drugged her husband, overdosed him on insulin, and then just sat there and ordered groceries and complained about him while he was laying there dying in the way that he was most terrified of. And my job requires me to walk among monsters, and my faith calls me to fear no evil. But as a resident of this community, the idea that she can get up and walk out of here with the rest of us terrifies me, and I hope it terrifies you. Because there is no question if she will hurt another person. It is when, and it is who. And defense counsel asked you in voir dire, how do you want to feel when you leave this courthouse? And I hope your answer is the same as mine, to see that justice is done. And it would be a grave injustice. What a triumph of bad to acquit the woman who did this to Joseph Hartsfield in such a terrible and calculating way. She is not Richard Jewell. She is not the hero that they brought up in voir dire. She is who we have to be protected from. She is not a kind and loving person. She is not this person who's been wrongfully accused. She is, unfortunately, for all of us, a murderer. And I asked you that question in voir dire. What does a murderer look like? And now you know, because she's sitting right there. And it's your job to find her guilty and hold her accountable. Thank you.
I think that was very well done. What do you think? So after this, of course, the jury instructions were read, and the jury went off to deliberate. The clock started, and they deliberated for 1 hour. 1 whole hour. Of course, this trial was not live streamed. The judge did not allow cameras in only. He allowed it for closing arguments and for the verdict. So we shall now teleport ourselves to the verdict and watch that together. Okay, so here we go. This was 1 hour later. I wonder what Sarah was thinking. Was she like, oh damn, they're back already? I'm innocent. I'm gonna walk. No. Very guilty. And that was yesterday, October 8th. Today, October 9th of 2025, if you're watching live, she was sentenced to life without parole plus a $10,000 fine. So yeah.
Speaking through your foreperson, Mr. Dawson, are you
Wait.
the
We're going to have to boost this a little bit. Hold on. That should be better.
Four-person.
Yes, Your Honor.
Has the jury reached the verdict?
Yes, Your Honor, we have.
Chad? Thank you. Mrs. Hartsfield, if you would stand at this time. Ms. Henry, if you would read the verdict, please.
In cause number 23-DCR-0063, the State of Texas versus Sarah Hartsfield, we, the jury, find the defendant, Sarah Hartsfield, guilty of the offense of murder as alleged in the indictment.
All right, you can have a seat.
She shook her head. Did you see that? This is her here. She just shook her head. She probably rolled her eyes as well. We couldn't see that, but like, yeah, they found you guilty. My goodness.
Does anyone want me to poll the jury?
No, Your Honor.
No,
All right. We're going to move to the second phase of this trial. It's much like the first phase, but won't take near as much time generally. You'll go back in the jury room. I'll give them a couple of minutes. We'll come back in. You'll hear opening statements by the state, by the defense. You'll hear witnesses from the state or the defense. And then you'll be given another charge. It'll be read to you, and we'll go through the same procedure as this first phase. So if you would go back into your room, but we'll call you out very shortly.
Okay, so that was the sentencing phase. And so, yeah, they deliberated in the guilt or innocence phase, came back with a guilty verdict, then they had to start the sentencing phase. And, of course, the state had opening statements with aggravating factors presented, and then, of course, the defense had their opening statements with their mitigating factors presented. The jury went back in. That was actually today, because the judge then sent them home. So come back in the morning, which would be October 9th of 2025, and then said, and then you will deliberate what you think the sentence should be, like what you would recommend. Ultimately, it's up to the judge to decide. But they recommended life without parole, and that's what the judge sentenced her to, plus a $10,000 fine. So, okay, so that was the verdict, and that is what we have for that. Now, after that, they actually had, it says, Chambers County DA's office discusses Sarah Hartsfield trial verdict, okay? So that's what we're going to watch now, and then we're pretty much done. Then we're done with discussing the entire case from the beginning, Sarah Hartsfield's background, all her husbands, the fiancé, the arson allegations, and then why she was on trial now, when she was arrested. All of that was done at the beginning of the stream, a full 1 hour and I think 5-minute presentation. So watch that if you didn't see it. Let's have a look now at this press conference, which happened today. So this is brand new for you.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank the jury in this case. You had to sit through medical testimony and about 34 witnesses. This jury was highly attentive, patient, and never seemed frustrated with the long days and countless bench conferences while listening to the irritating white noise as the lawyers conferred with the judge. To the jury, you got it right, and you should be proud of your hard work. Judge Kane, for running a professional courtroom, thank you, and always being fair to both sides. There are so many who deserve credit for this conviction, for their participation, for coming forward with information, that I cannot thank everyone. But it did begin with Houston Methodist Baytown doctors and nurses, knowing that there was foul play from the beginning. The Chambers County Sheriff's Office, under the leadership of Brian Hawthorne, and the patrolman on duty, Yateman, who also saw something was not right. And CCSO Detective Skylar Rocks, who knew in her gut that this was intentional and never took no for an answer, persevered, took hold of this case with dogged determination, and worked closely with my office to make sure that we got it right. To the Hartsfield family, thank you for your patience. We are all deeply affected by your loss, and Joseph deserved better. As did the countless other victims in the wake of Sarah Hartsfield's reign of terror for the entirety of her life. To the law enforcement and prosecutors in other jurisdictions, I hope now that we have done all the work for you, you will seek justice for the many other victims of this psychopath. And just because she has been convicted here does not assuage your sworn duty to do your job in seeking justice in your jurisdictions. To the Donahue children, I applaud your courage and grieve your childhood that you were robbed of at the literal hands of your own mother. Heather Donahue, you are lucky to be alive. No thanks to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Phoenix, who refused to prosecute the murder for hire plot against you. Maybe they will move forward now that we have wrapped up their case for them in a tidy bow. And finally, Mallory Vargas, you are a force to be reckoned with. You have a heart of gold, a heart for victims of crime, and a passion for what is right. This case was no less a mountain to be conquered, and you've climbed that mountain and reached the peak and planted the flag of justice. I'm going to turn over the questions to Mallory Vargas. She was the leader in this, and she deserves all the credit for this success. And y'all can direct your questions to her if you have any.
Mallory, based on all of the extra things that came up during this, I mean, what do you think, why do you think Sarah Hartsfield was never stopped before this and arrested or prosecuted?
I can't speak.
That's the reporter from KPRC2 Houston, Bryce Newberry. He has done so well on this case, in reporting on this case. And Sarah Hartsfield eventually also texted him a whole lot.
To other jurisdictions. I mean, we see where there are sometimes agencies that it's easier to pass things off than investigate difficult offenses, and she's certainly skilled. She's really good at talking her way out of things. You heard that in the testimony, and it takes a lot of time. I can't thank my boss. I can't thank the DA enough for her allowing me to pour my time into this. And that's not something that everyone has the resources or the ability to do. But I mean, I feel like we were able to prove extraneous offenses in our own case. So it's there, it's possible.
What do you make of her demeanor in the courtroom throughout the trial?
I think it showed who she was. When she would come in, initially she appeared poised. She was very performative. I don't know if people noticed, but she carried the Bible, but then she would leave it. She would forget it. She didn't bring it back to the jail with her. She wore what looked like a wedding ring on her finger. But as people began to speak the truth about her, the facade wore off. She glared at witnesses. She indicated that her children were liars. She would glare at me when I was at the bench or whenever I was at a witness stand, and I think it just was a matter of time before it wore off.
How do you feel that the jury decided to give her life in prison?
I'm grateful. I wouldn't have asked for it if I didn't think it was warranted. I genuinely feel sorrowful for her. Mm-hmm. I genuinely believe that she was a victim of sexual abuse, but that doesn't excuse her or absolve her of any of the horrible things that she's done to people. And I'm grateful that Chambers County decided to hold her accountable and protect everyone else.
What do you make of the speed of the jury's verdict and then also the punishment?
You're here. It was a wealth of information, and I think that the speed at which they decided her guilt was a message to the community. It was a message to the other jurisdictions even, that they saw through all of it. And I think defense did an excellent job. I don't think that any defense attorney that I've ever encountered could have given her a better defense than Mr. Darwin. But there was just an overwhelming amount of evidence. And then I think whenever they heard the sorrow of Helen compared with the the trauma of the children, it was just clear that it was a safety issue, the sentence.
And you talked about the overwhelming amount of evidence a lot. Was there a key piece of evidence that you think sealed the deal for the jury on this?
I think there were two things that broke my heart the most, and I don't know if it resonated with the jury. I haven't spoken with them, but I could see their faces a little bit. One of those was the Apple legacy, and I think I had never heard of that. I was stunned at that. And the grocery shopping, like while the grocery shopping, and I really struggled with this, like while he was like dying, she was ordering groceries, and we had talked amongst ourselves. ADA Sarah Porterfield even brought up, like, what was she gonna make? Like, what was the point of the grocery? It was a table full of groceries, and it was just evident that she didn't care about his life or his death. And I think that was clear in the messages that they read between her and a lot of people. Like the Facebook message before calling 911 to Carlene, there were a lot, but just her own actions, her own words in those moments where maybe he could have been saved.
With insulin as the tool, how did the preparation process look? Because insulin's an unusual method. Did the preparation look different for y'all versus others?
Yes. This whole case was different than anything I've ever worked.
Yes.
I've never seen someone with this much. Like, she's very intelligent, but she also made a lot of mistakes. And it was her own mouth, like her own words, that alerted everyone to the fact that she so obviously was the killer. I mean, insulin it would have been great had it not been Joe, right? Like, that he didn't have this actual fear of insulin, this documented fear of being low, where his own doctors are like, he wouldn't do this to himself, he's scared of it. And then the fact that he had this overwhelming amount of insulin in his system, it just I mean, it was different, but it wasn't at the same time. It was different in that there was just so much evidence.
Have you talked to the family since the sentencing, how they felt getting justice for Joseph?
Yeah, I think
so. The questions are a little soft, but we can definitely hear them. It's not the worst press conference, hey? Not bad quality. Sometimes, like the post-sentencing or post-verdict press conferences, there's definitely a truck in the background. We can always hear that. But they just asked, like, have you spoken to the family? How do they feel about the justice being served for Joseph Hartsfield? So that would be the question now.
I have talked to the family, and it's like we're family now, and that kind of happens in these kind of cases. I know that there's, I don't want to speak for them. It feels like there's a sense of finality, but Cheryl's talked to them about a grief, like a second-hand grief that can come after this, that happens in conclusions like this.
How do you, I guess, get to the point of saying to the jury, like, hey, we want life for this? What goes into that decision?
I think I said this in my close. It's not comfortable for me. It makes me feel very heavy. But there are just certain people that have proven themselves to be too dangerous to be with the rest of us. And if not her, who? I mean, her own kids weren't safe in the home. And as a mother, even having undergone trauma myself, like, I can't imagine the ability to inflict that so consistently upon everyone, including the people you're literally biologically supposed to protect.
How unusual was it to have the family of the defendant actually sitting with the family of the victim?
I've never seen it.
No.
I've never seen it.
Neither.
There was some indication at the end, it sounds like, that she wants to appeal now.
That's standard. I expect that in every case with a large sentence. I've never not seen it in a murder. I've never not seen it in a case with a large sentence. So that's pretty standard. We expect that.
Yeah, I mean, we would guess that she would do that immediately. That is her right. How dare this jury convict me? She was shaking her head. Can you imagine the amount of messages that she's going to send now to the media? Because she's been sending thousands of messages since she's been arrested. She was arrested February 3rd of 2023. And since she's been in jail, she literally watches the media reports on the TV, in the jail, or in her cell. And then she gets on it's like a kiosk system. And then she starts messaging all the reporters, like, you better do some better reporting. You're not putting me in good light, trying to control the narrative. From the jail, can you imagine? I'm asking you guys a question. Even if you're watching the replay, then let me know in the comments. What do you think was the most damning evidence for the jury? I know we didn't get to watch the whole trial. The judge didn't allow cameras for the whole trial. But I did go over so many reports, summaries of the days, and we did a whole presentation before we watched the closing arguments. So based on what we've seen together, what we've heard, the closing arguments and everything, what do you think, in your opinion, was the most damning evidence for the jury? Or if you were on the jury, what would have been the most damning evidence for you against Sarah Hartsfield?
Pretty much every case like this.
And this may be a question for the sheriff's office, but how soon now will she go to TDCJ?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that.
If she's been a problem in the jail, they'll put her on the fast track. And she's had some issues in the jail. So they generally put her on the fast track if you're a problem.
I do want to take a moment to thank the team specifically. I couldn't have done this without them. I couldn't have done this without the unwavering and incredible support of Cheryl Leek Henry. She's a giant in the courtroom. I'm blessed beyond measure to be able to learn under her and from her and through her. And I'm so grateful for all of her faith in me. But I'm also equally grateful for this team. It's a lot of hours. Like, I think I was working like 18 to 20 hours a day during the last couple of weeks. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without Shaquita Jones, Sarah Porterfield, Eric Carcerano. We have a new attorney, Allison Kling.
We haven't even had time to swear her in yet. She just got her bar results this week, and we haven't even sworn her in yet. We've been too busy. So that's going to be first thing.
Congrats.
Big celebration. I have 3 kids of my own, and my mom, Robin Edmonds, just stepped in for me in that role so that I could do this. And my kids, Vincent, Max, and Ezra, who unfortunately, and those of us that are parents know they have to carry this weight with us.
Yep.
And it's hard as a mom to miss out on things. But I'm so grateful for their grace. And I'm so grateful for my husband, my partner, Ernesto Vargas, who has pushed me and empowered me to be able to do, to be able to work like this. The families, they're my family now. Those girls, Ryan, the Hartsfields, the Knernschulds, just so many people that have been so impacted and have lived with the fear of speaking out. And I'm so grateful that they came forward. Our investigators, Brad Crone, Nick Gonzalez, Tommy Henry. Skylar rocks, though. She took the beating of a lifetime on the stand, but another murder would have gone free. A serial killer would have gone free if Skylar did not work. Like, I've never seen a case worked. And I know there are going to be people who tell me how much better I could have done in the courtroom. Just like, you know, there are people that are telling her, like, why the heck didn't you get the pins? But first call out as a detective, unbelievably well-worked case. And I'm just so grateful because she caught a serial killer and she made us all safer. She made the whole county safer.
Yep.
And I also need to thank our support staff and everyone else at the office, Leslie Childress, Ashley Yulke, and Logan Silcox, including everyone else at the office who held down the fort, because this is a whole hands-on-deck effort, and everyone poured into this to get justice for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that was that, everyone. Now, just when we started this live stream, the reports were coming in of what the sentence was, right? And as time goes by, I keep checking just to make sure. And it actually, she's 50 years old. She got a life sentence because they say that in Texas, the LWOP without parole, life without parole, is reserved for capital murder convictions, which this was not. So apparently she's eligible for parole when she's 80 years old. So yeah, whoa, imagine if she gets out when she's 80. That actually sounds really dangerous. It sounds really dangerous. I'll make sure to put a pinned comment just to update that it's not LWOP, that it's a life sentence. Depending on how she behaves as well, which I don't think she's going to behave in prison. Do you think she's going to behave in prison? Do you think she'll be paroled? I don't think so. But anyway, she is apparently eligible for parole in the state of Texas after serving 30 years. And she's 50 years old now. So 80 years old. Will we be there to watch it together? I always ask that, you know. Maybe we'll be there to watch it together. That'll be amazing if we do, right? Kathleen Craig had said, thank you, Grizzly, for all the work you do for us. Thank you so much. Grizzly Cat says, thank you. Thank you, Grizzly Cat, for the documents that you were able to obtain in this case for me, which I was able to use for my research. If you guys missed all the research, meaning, whoa, the charts, the bullet points, yeah, let me just give you a preview. There you go. This is how the presentation started, because that's how crazy this case is. You're like, whoa, we're going to need to see pictures, charts, like who's at the center of this and what is going on. 5 husbands and a fiancé. 1 fiancé dead, 1 husband dead, and then she wanted the new wife of her 3rd husband killed by her 4th husband. Oh my goodness. So yeah, if you missed the presentation at the beginning of the live stream, please go and check that out whenever you can. If you're tired now, then have a rest and come back tomorrow and check that out. That'll be your homework, okay? Sometimes you get assigned homework over here. But it's, you know, hopefully it'll be informative. I do also quickly want to show you this, which is the KPRC2 Click to Houston playlist, because they've done such excellent boots on the ground reporting on this case, right? So look at this. I've linked this in the description box for you. And if you go down, you can go all the way to the bottom of this playlist, and it starts with woman accused of murdering her 5th husband, and so they go. And it was Bryce Newberry, a local reporter. You could see here, who's Sarah Hartsfield and what to know about her murder case. And so they went from 2 years ago all the way to present day. Bryce Newberry is like you guys were saying, is that Brian Enton that asked the question? No, it was Bryce that asked the question. But he's like the Brian Enton of this case, right? If you don't know who Brian Enton is, oh my word. Like, do you live under a rock? I hope you'll find out. But so if you just check here, look at the playlist, and you can see here's also who is Sarah Hartsfield. There are also ones, a very evil side to her. There's also a documentary that they've made, 2 sides of Sarah Hartsfield. So you can just check all of these out if you want to just catch some glimpses. There were little snippets that they were able to show throughout the trial. You know, little bits of testimony, little bits more of Sarah Hartsfield. So go check that out, okay? I've also linked some articles for you and, of course, all my sources for my research. Thank you so much if you made it to the end. If you're on Replay Crew and you made it to the end, please comment that below. I'm always like so amazed when you guys watch all the way to the end, you know, when we're not live. That's so sweet. Thank you so much. All right, everyone. So Karen says her phone and past behavior did it in. I think that phone was the most damning evidence. There's so much else, but no wonder she said, oh crap, when they said, you can give us your phone now. And she's like, do I have to? And they're like, yeah, we have a search warrant. And she's like, oh crap. So, okay, I will see you again very soon. In the meantime, stay safe.